Welcome to the City of Huber Heights, State of Ohio City Council meeting, regular session, June 13, 2016, starting at 7 o'clock p.m. Please stand for the invocation given by Pastor Randy Griffin of the Free Methodist Church, 6875 Old Troy Pike.
Jesus said, I tell you the truth. Whoever hears my word and believes him who sent me has eternal life and will not be condemned. He has crossed over from death to life. All we need is to live by the truth. Imagine that all humanity is like prisoners of war, condemned to die and in line for the furnace. Then all of a sudden the word gets out that a gate has been opened. Whoever simply leaves the line of death and goes through the gate will be saved and set free. But some don't believe it. It seems too good to be true. Some think it's crazy. Others believe the message is just a lie. Some have been in line for so long they are afraid to leave it or simply don't want to. Still others don't believe the line they are in will lead them to destruction anyway. But the wise ones recognize their situation. When they hear the message, they know that this is a chance to live. They believe the message, or are at least willing to find out if it's true, and they go. They find the gate, they enter through it, and experience the truth of the message they heard. They are alive, and they are free, because Jesus is the gate. Jesus said again, I tell you the truth, I am the gate. Whoever enters through me will be saved. He will come in and go out and find freedom. A criminal comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I have come that you may have life and have it to the full. Let's pray. Father, we thank you that you can be trusted, that your words are true. Lord, help us to live by what is true. Lord, guide us tonight as we meet, that your good work will be done. And we'll thank you in Jesus' name. Amen.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And calling Clerk of Council Rogers for roll call.
Mr. Shaw? Here. Mrs. Smith?
Here.
Mr. Starline?
Here.
Mr. Campbell?
Here.
Mr. Otto? Here. Mrs. Blankenship?
Here.
Mrs. Bird?
Here.
Mr. Lyons?
Here.
Mayor McMasters?
Here. Approval of the minutes. There is one set of minutes for approval this evening. If there are no corrections, these minutes will stand as approved. Council's wish, stands as approved. Special presentation. I'd like to welcome the Miami Valley Young Marines, Staff Sergeant Jesse Loper, and Young Marines Corporal Levi Stewart for a presentation.
Good evening. My name is Staff Sergeant Loper.
And I'm Young Marine Gunner Sergeant Murphy.
We are members of the local Young Marines unit who support the Miami Valley. For those who are not familiar with us, we are a youth development organization focused on teaching the area's youth to live a healthy, drug-free lifestyle.
As many of you are familiar with, there has been a huge increase in the drug use and trafficking throughout Southeast Ohio. This is a trend we would like to join forces with other local youth groups to combat.
With that said, our organization has started what we've coined Operation Spartan Spear. This is a three-part operation conducted not just by us, but as many youth organizations as we can get to assist. These three parts are individual efforts, group efforts, and a large-scale operation effort. An individual effort will be conducted by all members of the youth organizations involved. We will go out to our friends, family, schools, churches, and etc., and seek out signatures for a pledge to live a drug-free life.
The second part is the group efforts. These are the discretion of the groups involved and will use their group's collective effort to create their own project that targets drugs in their area. This could be as simple as creating a short video describing the impact of drugs on the human body, and sharing it on a large-scale effort, like we have planned, where we go to local schools and give an hour presentation for as many youth as we can.
The third part of the operation is the operation effort. Our collective plan is twofold. We are first going to attempt the Guinness World Record. This will take place on August 6th right here in your backyard at Gary Sherman Park. We will need at least 300 participants for it to be successful. At the event, we could charge a nominal fee for anyone who wants to join in this attempt. These proceeds will go towards the main effort.
Based on the amount of money our operation raises, we plan to set up Boost, the Huber Heights Fall Festival. We have already received permission to work on this and plan to make a whole section devoted to drug education for the participants of the event. This will include activities for both youth and adults, and ideally will include classes throughout the day hours. People can sign up for these respective booths. Each booth will have different focus, whether it be related to the heroin epidemic we are facing, or the legalization of marijuana in Ohio, or combating drinking and driving. Each booth will be created by the youth in each organization.
We come here today with our operation plans, and we hope to get the full support of the local community, whether it be via monetary donations, getting a group involved, or just coming out and supporting our activities. There is something everyone can do. We can ask the council aid for our efforts where they can in spreading the word of operation and aiding our advertising efforts in any way possible.
We hope that you all take what we have described here today and do your part. This is a community effort, not just here, but throughout the Miami Valley.
Help us take our Operation Spartan Spear to the next level. Help us take it as far as this may reach. Thank you for your time, and Semper Fidelis.
Thank you. And could you tell me again what date you were going to Gary Sherman? August 6th?
August 6th. Yes, sir.
And did you have a time set up for that yet?
I do not believe we have a time set up for that yet.
Okay, so you have a Facebook page that has the time and the sign-up procedures? Okay. Yeah, and you're looking for 300 people? Okay.
Are there any more questions?
Yes. May I ask?
And Ms. Blankenship, thank you.
Yes. Do you have a presentation that you have made up? Because it might be nice to do it here at a council meeting, prior to a council meeting. I don't know how long it is, but that'd be some way to get it out to the viewing audience that we get, that you might not get there, even though you're aiming at the youth. There are many older people that also get on drugs. Talking to our fire department, there's all ages. It's not just confined to youth. So it would be a good message for everybody.
Yes, ma'am. We can plan on that.
Okay. Thank you.
And Ms. Burge.
It seems like we could help them out by using key ads to advertise this over a period of time as we get closer.
All right. And Mr. Falkowski, would you be the point of contact to?
Yes, if you can get me information, then we can work on getting it up on the billboard. Help with the advertising.
Sure. All right. Thank you. Thank you. Mhm. All right. Moving on to agenda item 8, citizen comments.
First up, we have Mr. Stan Leeds, 5119 Rye Drive with the Huber Heights Amateur Radio Club.
My name's Stan Leeds, 5119 Rye Drive. Like I said, I'm amateur radio call sign KC70EHJ with the Huber Heights Amateur Radio Club. And thanks for this opportunity to meet. Number of years, each June, last full weekend of June, we have what we call our Amateur Radio Field Day, which is sponsored by our national affiliate, the Amateur Radio Relay League. And through the number of years, I've coordinated with Mr. Rogers on a couple items that we deal with that. And this year, we kind of got behind the curve, so that's why I'm doing it personally today. Basically, one of the key elements is for us to communicate around the world. A lot of that is to the other parts of the country for their time zones and everything, so it allows us to work overnight. So one of the things we have reserved the Cottonwood Park on Fishburg Road there. And one of the things we always do is we ask permission to be out overnight in the city park and have that coordinated through, your police, your fire, EMS, whatever other agencies that are required. So either the copy you got or I got a fresh copy.
I already forwarded the copies of the invitations, not only to council and senior staff, but to the fire and police chiefs as well.
Excellent, thank you. And then the other portion of this is to invite the city council, the mayor, usually our other agencies that are here, and the public also at the same time too. It'll be June 25th through the 26th. We'll be there pretty much around 2 p.m. Saturday to around 8 a.m. Sunday morning. You can come here and see how amateur radio works. We'll be doing local communication, around the world communication. Hopefully someone there will have satellite. I personally won't be there. I'll be in Germany at the time doing the AMVEST there. But we'll have members of the club to be able to receive it. At the same time, too, city officials visit. We get points for that. So kind of helps us in the bragging rights for the points we amass for our items. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right.
Next up, we have Ms. Liz Gitzinger, 5803 Handel Court. Maybe 5833? Okay.
As he just said, I am Liz Gitzinger. I live at 5833 Handel Court. I have lived in Huber Heights 46 years. In looking at the ordinance 2016-0 concerning chickens on residential properties, I noticed some of the districts are not included, which I think Jason's going to help me with. I would like to know where this is located in Huber Heights. All conditions mentioned in item number 1181.19, agriculture animals under 8, number 1 through 9, and C and D. Who will enforce these? The zoning department? Will they need to hire more people? And will they follow up to see if the rules are being followed? My biggest fear is someone will bypass these conditions, get chickens, and then either be notified they are in violation or realize chickens are harder than they thought. Abandon the chickens and we will have them running around creating problems we do not want. Also, I would like to tell you what I noticed the past Saturday while I was working at the Wise Half Marathon. I was at the 4-mile marker, which is located in Parktown, at County Park Drive and Somerset Drive. There is a small woods located there. I was there from 6:30 a.m. to around 10 a.m. Shortly after I arrived, I heard a rooster crow. My ears perked up. First, what's a rooster doing around when they are prohibited? And this is Parktown. Don't they have a covenant? I heard him quite a few times coming. More than I was trying to figure out where it was coming from. I asked some of the residents out walking if they knew where the rooster was. They said it was loose in the area, and they thought it came from this area, Huber Heights. Before I left the area, I walked to the other side of the woods. It's not very big woods, to see the houses there, to see if they might have a coop. Well, they didn't. I couldn't see a coop. So I went back on the sidewalk. There's only a sidewalk on one side of the road. And when I got near that woods, I heard this uproar. And I know it was a chicken in there because I've heard chickens make that noise before. I was so scared, I got in my car and took off. Question. Turn page. Who's responsible for any loose chickens or roosters in our neighborhoods? Who do we call? Do we really want these problems? Don't we have enough problems getting residents to maintain their properties? Thanks for letting me express my concerns.
Thank you very much.
Pardon.
Last up, we have Mr. Ronald Deek, 5908 Oak Creek Trail.
Over the last week, I think we've learned a lot about what a shed is and what an accessory building is. I'd like to thank Ms. Smith for showing the construction of her new accessory building on Facebook. She uses Facebook a lot more than I do, but that's her choice. Soon thereafter, a posting occurred. Someone was trying to play a game of gotcha. That's my opinion. Ms. Smith produced the necessary paperwork and posted it, though she did not have to do anything else, as she did everything by the book. This charade could have been best handled one-on-one. The process has not changed for at least the last 8 years. I got to give kudos to some of the city staff, and Scott just happens to be sitting there, and when I did mine, and the permitting and inspection team. The process has not changed in the years that I've been here, and probably since the ordinance was created, except for maybe the cost of the permit. Since mine is on concrete, it's already considered an accessory building. When I went in and got the permit, the young lady at the front desk told me that, automatically broke down the square footage, and it automatically determined what it is and what we were doing. I paid my fee, built my shed. Scott came out and explained it too, and had it inspected. The inspector said it'd probably stand up better than the house we live in. Janelle's was totally based on size. Who cares if we have an accessory building or a shed? The city has a process that has not changed in many years, and making it an issue for no reason is not good for the city. The first thing they asked me was the structure more than 100 square feet. I said no, but it has a concrete pad, so it automatically defaulted. Both of us, we can build as many as we want as long as we don't cover more than 50% of the ground that you own. I could have probably built 15. Am I going to do that? No. If this was an educational tool, then educate the residents by a circular in the water bills or some other thing on the agenda where we don't need to really talk about inconsequential items to make meetings last till midnight and beyond. Janelle followed the ordinances. We need to concentrate as a city and as a council on bigger and more important things like energy aggregation, soft water, water pressure, to name a few. I see we have another item on the ballot for November. I need a quick clarification, just like the young lady over here talked about chickens. If the voters approve the measures that are on the ballot, does the council still have to vote against it and override it? So if the chickens get approved, is it worded in a way where the council can override the will of the people, whether it's voted up or voted down? Same thing for the ones that's coming on the ballot and that we're reading again today. Are they going to be where it's the will of the people to go ahead with whatever it is? I think the last item, I'm not going to stay here that long, forgot what it is, the last item. Is that going to be worded in such a way that it gives the council overriding preference of the will of the people? I mean, this is an election. Come on. It's the will of the people. What do the people want? If someone as a resident had enough signatures to put chicken on the ballot, then everybody should salute smartly and proceed on if it gets approved. That's what elections are for. Some things are meant to be decided here. I personally think chicken should have probably been decided here, but she had enough signatures to get it on the ballot. That shouldn't proceed, or she didn't, however it was. It's on the ballot. You guys put it, you folks put it on the ballot. Council put it on the ballot. You spent the however much $1,000 to put it on. I don't know if it's written in a way that it gives the council, even if it gets passed, the overriding authority from a vote. That's all I got.
Thank you, Mr. Dick.
Clarification, Mr. Mayor, the chicken legislation has not been submitted to the Board of Elections and is now on the ballot. Yeah. Because of what transpired between now and later this year. So.
No, but I heard rumors about the council having overriding authority, and it just gives permission, and then the council still has to vote, and they can vote it up or down against the will of the people.
That's right. And on the ballot there. We'll have a discussion on the two pieces of legislation that as we go forward, and with
So we could get to wait for that discussion on agenda tonight, clarify any unclarified issues as we go forward. And yes, Mr. Deacon, you'll learn a little bit more about those resolutions as we go on this evening. To clear up some of the rumors that you're ingested. All right. Citizens registered to speak on agenda items. There are none there. And I would like to point out, though, that this is a section of the meeting that we have on here for a specific reason, in that it allows residents to listen to the discussions, for instance, on chickens and the water softening ballot measures, and then if they have further need of further clarifications, they could bring it up then, and I think we'd end up with questions that are insightful. So those that are listening and those that participate, you can always use that means to talk about agenda items after the discussion has taken place and to help clarify some of the questions. All right, City Manager report.
I only have one thing tonight, and as you know, Mr. Schomer is out on vacation today, so thank you for allowing me to sit in for him. But as you're setting your schedules, a reminder, Saturday, July 2nd is the annual Star Spangled Heights celebration. Starts off with a parade, starting off around the Huber Center, goes down to Nebraska along Brant Pike. And then down at Cloud Park, there is a day's worth of activities, from food truck rallies, the Historical Society car show, a kids zone with inflatables and bounce houses, those kind of things, and then the fireworks themselves around 10 p.m. So a full day's activities. Be a great day. That's it. Thanks.
All right. Thank you very much. And pending business, 11A, please read the resolution.
Item 11A, a resolution adopting a preliminary tax budget for revenues of the City of Huber Heights, Ohio for the period beginning January 1st, 2017 and ending December 31st, 2017 at the second reading.
Thank you very much. And call on Assistant City Manager Scott Plakowski. Comments?
I did that before I knew Rob was over here.
I'm sorry?
Thank you. This item is is for the 2017 tax budget. This was brought forth at the previous council meeting and had a public hearing on it. This is the second reading. The request is to waive the third reading and pass tonight due to that it has to be submitted just a little over 30 days from tonight. So if it does get passed tonight, the 30 days go into effect. If we wait till the next meeting, we will have passed that deadline for submittal. As a reminder, this is just the revenue portion that does get submitted to Miami County and Montgomery County, even though Montgomery County does not require it, but Miami County does.
All right, Council. Ms. Blankenship.
Move to waive the third reading.
Thank you. Mrs. Smith.
Second.
Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Starline?
Yes.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
Mr. Otto?
Yes.
Mrs. Blankenship?
Yes.
Mrs. Byrd?
Yes.
Mr. Lyons?
Yes.
Mr. Shaw?
Yes.
And passes 8-0. Motion to adopt. Ms. Blankenship.
So moved.
Mr. Otto.
Second.
And call the roll, please.
Mr. Starline?
Yes.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
Mr. Otto?
Yes.
Mrs. Blankenship?
Yes.
Mrs. Byrd?
Yes.
Mr. Lyons?
Yes.
Mr. Shaw?
Yes.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
And passes 8-0. Moving on to 11B. Please read the ordinance.
Item 11B, an ordinance directing the Board of Elections of Montgomery County and Miami County to place on the ballot at the general election to be held on November 8, 2016, the question of whether the City of Huber Heights should effect an amendment to Part 11, Title 9, Chapter 1181 of the Codified Ordinances of Huber Heights to allow chickens in residential areas at the second reading.
Thank you very much. And call on City Manager Assistant City Manager Scott Bukowski for comments.
As this one has already had a partial discussion earlier, this is the second reading of the ordinance to place the new chicken ordinance onto the ballot in November. There is an amended legislation in your packet that if you would like to amend tonight and then pass to a third reading, that is one way to do it, to get the proper information. Mr. Schaefer can go into more of the legal aspects of the amended legislation.
Mr. Schaefer.
Would you like a little summary of how all this works? Is that what you're asking for there, Mr. Mayor?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So, the Ohio Constitution gives local home rule powers to municipalities within the state. In various different pieces of litigation, the Supreme Court has said that those powers exist even in the absence of a charter. In fact, then, a charter becomes the limiting factor on the powers of local self-government that a municipality can exercise. The case law on the subject of the power of council to specifically pass off its right to pass legislation to the voters and allow the voters not to advise the council, but to tell the council what the voters want, and the council then having to conform with that is clear, but it's fairly complex in how they get there. The bottom line is that the courts have held on numerous occasions that as it relates to legislation specifically, if the charter provides a process by which legislation is passed by a council, and that's all it says. In other words, it doesn't say that as part of those powers, the city can pass off its power to the residents to pass legislation that they would be binding on. It doesn't say that. The council doesn't have that power. Now, the issue of advisory opinions has also been litigated, and initially, the case law came down on the side of interpretation that said if your charter doesn't allow for it, you can't do it. The Ohio Supreme Court held that in a case before it, where the charter had its own language with regard to how legislation needed to be passed, and didn't include the power to pass off to the voters. But that same charter did not specifically speak to advisory opinions. One way or another. The court said under those circumstances, where the charter is totally silent on the issue, one way or another, that is what we call an implied right, and the city has the right to put advisory opinions before the voters. An advisory opinion, Mr. Dean, is just that. It doesn't, whatever the outcome is of an advisory a ballot issue, does not require council to act in any particular way. In other words, council still has the discretion to do what it feels is best, notwithstanding the outcome of an advisory ballot issue. And that's where we find ourselves. Our charter does not Our charter specifically speaks to how legislation is to be passed, and that's the determining factor. Because it doesn't provide any other ways, then there aren't any other ways. Now, having said that, we have had discussion here in the past about the way in which the city obtained ownership, if you will, of the water utility. Suburban Water was a privately owned entity. It was set up by Charles Huber when he began the development of Huber Heights. It was sold by Mr. Huber, I believe, to a third-party entity. The city took action to take the water utility by eminent domain. That legislation was passed by this council. The 30-day referendum period then began to run. The water utility who had owned it at that time circulated referendum petitions to the voters of the city, got enough signatures on those petitions, valid signatures on the petitions, to force the issue to go to referendum, which our charter provides. In that way, then, the vote of the electorate is binding. And in that case, the election came out in favor of the taking of the water utility by eminent domain. And council, who had already passed the ordinance to do so, subject to the referendum, acted upon that, took the public utility, and the rest is history. So, legislation is passed in a certain fashion by this council. In the case of referendum, an initiative, and recall, but recall really doesn't count as a legislative process, but referendum and initiative, those are the only other two ways that the voters can bind this council. Putting legislation directly to the voters is neither a referendum nor an initiative. Both referendums and initiatives are undertaken by the electorate, essentially, by the circulation of petitions and signatures by the electorate to question, if you will, the legislation. And that's where we are today. The law, as I understand it, and I spent a lot of time on this issue to make sure that I'm right, says that we can put the chicken issue to the electors as an advisory ballot issue. Council is not bound by the outcome of that election. Obviously, however that might come out, council certainly is going to take a good hard look at it, but it's not bound by it.
If the lady that was originally collecting the signatures, if she had collected the necessary number, it would have been put on as an initiative and it would have been binding.
It would have been put on. It would have been put on as an initiative, and if it passed, in other words, the majority of the voters who voted on the issue said, "Yeah, we want chicken legislation." It would have passed, and it would have been binding upon this council.
Can we put an ordinance out there and put a statement in there that says that whatever the ordinance is, the voter's decision is binding?
No.
Okay.
Mr. Starling.
But Alan, following that, my mic's dead. But following that, nothing restricts the individual members of council from indicating their intention, if it passes, if it goes out for an advisory opinion and it passes, that they will
agree for themselves to follow it, or we could say that we're going to keep our mind open, but nothing restricts us from making that statement, but realizing that it is only a self-imposed statement. It is not something that is legally binding under law. Right?
You're absolutely right.
Okay.
Ms. Smith.
Thank you. Mr. Schaefer, last week I had asked you if you would reach out to Mrs. McBride and talk about the legislation that has been passed out before the meeting. Were you able to make contact with her?
I tried all week. We did trade messages. I finally sent you an email on Friday asking for her email address. I literally was in the process of sending her an email, which I ultimately did, when I got a call from her and we did talk.
So can you explain to me why in Section 1 under B, not more than 6 hens are still on this ballot when in fact it should be 4?
Until the legislation, until this council makes a decision to pass legislation, it could be 20 or 2.
Well, it's not very prudent of us to be trying to pass we should not be passing anything until the numbers are correct on this initiative or this particular piece of legislation. And I'm not comfortable voting on this when I know it says 6 hens right here. And I've been speaking to Sarah McBride for the last week and a half. So I've been able to contact her. I've been able to send her emails. I forward her your emails. And that's why she called you. And I'm just taken aback a little bit that it's been a full week and this has not been corrected. And it's standing before me. And if I'm going to have to vote on this, I'm going to vote no. And if we're going to go back to what goes to the ballot, why would we pay money of the taxpayers just for an advisory of what they think we should do? We should do what the people ask us to do. No questions asked. That's it. That's the bottom line. They are the people who elected us. We are here to do a job for them. And I think this advisory stuff is absolutely nonsense. We need to do what our voters ask us to do, either pass it, deny it, move on. But we need to get this legislation correct, and we need to get it under control quicker than longer, because the longer we continue to drag this out, it almost would appear like we don't even want to see this go to the ballot. And I can tell you that's how the Cluck Initiative feels. It feels like we are sending them in circles just so that they won't make it to the ballot. And that's very unhealthy, that our citizens feel like they can't have an initiative and bring it before the city and get treated fairly and honestly across the board without having to run into a brick wall. I'm very disturbed by that, and it's upsetting me.
Okay, so Janelle, the ability of this council to act in favor of whatever the voters might present to you in the way of an advisory ballot issue is entirely up to you. And of course, you can follow the will of the people. It's a right that you have. It's an inherent right that you have. Number one. Number two, in my case, it's been a day, not a week, because we traded a few calls, but I made numerous calls back to Sarah, and we had trouble getting together. If you want to change the legislation today by amending it, which we can do, you can make it 4 instead of 6. If this goes to the electorate, it's not going to go to the electorate necessarily in this exact fashion, and because it's going to have to go through the Planning Commission, it's going to have to come back before this council, and you're going to have numerous bites at the apple to make this legislation exactly the way you want it.
It needs to be exactly the way we want it right now, right here in front of us. It's been a week. It should have been 4 last week when we got it. It's still 6 this week, and that's not okay. That's not okay.
And Ms. Smith, the process now, we're already planning on having an amendment to the ballot initiative that was proposed last week. So the process would be to add or change the number from 6 to 4 when we make that motion for an amendment. Mr. Lyons.
Yes, Mr. Schaefer, this is a second reading, and I believe we had the first reading at our last council meeting, some 3 weeks ago, is that correct? And as it's already had the first reading, you cannot legally change it at all, is that correct?
I'm sorry. Ask the question again.
Since we've already had the first reading in council meeting about 3 weeks ago, our last council meeting, no matter what happens, you cannot change this legislation at all at this point, can you?
No, you have the right to amend the legislation.
No. I'm sorry, sir. My question was, you personally cannot change this legislation at this time?
No, I can't.
Yeah. So no matter what would have happened the last 3 weeks, it's already had one reading on council. You couldn't have changed it even if you wanted to.
That's accurate.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor.
Well, we have a proposed ordinance as amended as part of our package, which is one that we were planning on, or may be planning on, depending on how the discussion goes, to amend with the ordinance that was read last week. It could have come with 6 or 4 instead of 6.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously this was posted last week, Wednesday or Thursday. Thursday, so it wouldn't have been changed between Thursday and now. But
I would also point out that in getting to this point with the legislation that's before you, the group that's promoting the issue had this in front of our city staff, and our city staff has been through it in a fairly comprehensive fashion, and in fact has made recommended changes to it that have been adopted, have been understood and approved, if you will, by the people who are sponsoring the legislation in the first place. So what you're seeing in front of you is not 100% what was sponsored by those folks. It's been revised, revamped, reviewed by staff, and changes have been made to it to make it a better piece of legislation. I'm not suggesting that you shouldn't go from 6 to 4. Don't get me wrong there. I'm not arguing against that.
And I had posed another question in there, in that the ordinance could be written as such so that the council passes the ordinance, but then makes it conditional on the vote going at least 50% toward the ordinance. Did you address that?
Okay, so make sure I understand that. You had suggested that this council could go ahead and pass the legislation now in some fashion, whatever the final form might be, and then make it contingent upon whatever the vote of the people is.
Right.
And I would suggest to you that is placing the decision in front of the people, which is in a roundabout way getting around the issue of asking the people to do your job for you. Because if they vote it down, then it doesn't pass.
And so...
But then you're bound not to pass it based upon your theory, I guess, and based upon your example.
No, it just wouldn't go into effect.
Right.
Right. So,
Yes,
I mean, there's a whole bunch of, in the case that you supply there, about adding into the process as long as you follow the entire process. So if council passes it and puts an extra criteria on it, that would be similar to in here. Unfortunately, the case that they cite in here talks about the Constitution and not a charter, but in your Bedford case, it talks about Billington and Switzer suggest that the incident advisory election is constitutionally impermissible, not because the election is outside Bedford's power of local self-government, but because using such elections as a first step to charter amendment is inconsistent with the exclusive process of Section 9 of Article 15. Now, unfortunately, it doesn't specifically talk about the exclusive process of the city charter in this particular things, but saying that they're equivalent. It says, however, we have allowed municipalities to supplement the constitutional charter amendment process with procedures that are not contrary to the expressed provisions within the section of the Constitution. So if you can equate the Constitution process with the charter process, as long as you follow all the procedures of the charter process, then you should be able to add on supplemental procedures.
I guess what I come back to is what you can't accomplish directly, you can't accomplish indirectly. And that's what I think you're proposing. Because whether you put it to the voters and say it's up or down based upon what you say, we're bound by it. Or if you pass it now subject to it being passed, and if it doesn't pass, you don't do it, you find yourself in the same spot. I mean, you've given up your discretion.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll ponder that as we go forward. Mrs. Smith.
Mr. Schaefer, I know that you had talked about that staff had been able to look at this, make some changes. Can you tell me if anybody from the Cluck Initiative was a part of the changes and a part of this to be a collaborative effort so that they are also happy with some of the changes that have been made by staff?
Sure. I'm going to ask the city manager, acting city manager, Mr. Mikowski, who is the Washington person.
There were initial discussions when it's been brought up, like the first time, but the latest, this has been, we'll say, rewritten to meet our code, our language, that kind of thing. The revisions mirror other communities around here that are doing the same thing, looking at the same thing. A couple of the items, one was the proposal was for a 50-foot setback from any property line. This one has 20. The standard smaller lots, that would actually mean that you couldn't have chickens in any of our residential lots. They'd have to be over 100 feet wide to make that work. The 6 hens, that is something that came from, like I said, mirroring some of the other communities. If council wishes to change that to 4, that's a simple amendment.
I guess what I'm saying then is that it's their initiative. Why aren't we collaborating and working with them as a team? Because 6 might have been the original agreement, but you know, this is why I'm onto this, to be honest with you. It was probably 2 weeks ago, and I got a phone call from James Brown from WHIO at 4:30. I'm like, why is this man calling me? And all he wanted to know is how many chickens, how many hens were going to be on the ballot. How many were they? Was it going to be 6? Was it going to be 3? Was it going to be 4? He called City Hall. He had words, so to speak, and the city manager was not available. He made no comment. He said that he reached out to Mr. Schaefer, and he was not available. He called back at City Hall, still couldn't get an answer, so then he reached out to me. And I thought, well, you know, I don't know the answer, but he goes, well, I'm going to go on air in 30 minutes. I said, I'll tell you what, I don't know the answer, but I'm going to call you right back. Where is your phone number? So I did reach out to Sarah McBride, and I reached out to somebody else and on the Cluck Initiative, and what they told me is that they had changed that to compromise with the city so that instead of being 6 hens, it would be 4 hens and absolutely no roosters. And yes, I will make a comment that the rooster is running around in Parktown and carriage trails because I'm hearing a lot about it being their ward representative. That needs to be on somebody's dinner table. Anyway, regardless, that's what I'm trying to say is that if we could at least just work with the people as a team who come to us and want to start an initiative, it doesn't matter what it is, but I would like to see more of a teamwork between the government and the residents for what they want, because that's why we're here. And so whatever we need to do, I think really this probably might need to be tabled until the CLEC initiative can take a look at this to see if this meets their needs and what they were originally going after. I guess that's kind of where I'm at the moment. I'm not comfortable voting on this unless I know the CLEC initiative doesn't have a problem with it, because I don't want to have to continue to waste more time and energy on this when we can just get it all taken care of at one time.
First thing I will note that if, as described, the rooster is a wild animal, now I'm not really sure that you. I wouldn't recommend you capturing it and making it part of your dinner table. On the other hand, all this legislation and how it turns out in its final form is a matter of a number of different inputs, and however it turns out, if it turns out differently over the next week, that's perfectly fine. We'll take amendment requests. Council will discuss them, and we'll vote on those particular amendment requests. So if you have been in touch with the organizers and you would like to amend the amended ordinance, make the motion.
I'm sorry. I was going to say, so we have it before us for second reading. It won't be before us again until the end of the month. So we have at least 2 weeks. Why don't I simply resend this to Mrs. McBride, who apparently is a spokesperson, tomorrow, ask her to mark it up the way she thinks it ought to read, and I'll have it to circulate at the next committee meeting, at the next work session.
Well, I guess if the theory is that the one person that introduces the idea to the council gets to write the legislation, that's fine. But I don't. No, that's right. That's the point that I'm trying to make. Somehow we have come to 6 through the process that staff had gone through. If we want to make it 4, there's a process for that as well. But and it's quite fine if council wants to send it back to Ms. McBride to put her inputs in again. That's council's wish. So we can do that. Mr. Starling.
I can't recall which piece of legislation it was before, but we've had in the past where we had one that needed to be amended, but we knew we had a third reading ahead of us. And so rather than to have to amend again, we just waited until that third reading and amended. So since my understanding is the recommendation from work session is to pass this on to a third reading, I think we take the time in the next week and then the week following to look at what, if any, proposed amendments to make to this bill before it comes up for final vote in 2 weeks, and we can discuss that at work session, which I think is being discussed. What I will throw out, and I would be honored if Ms. Smith would do so with me, since both of us have had the opportunity to talk directly with Ms. McBride, get her input now on what her organization thinks needs to be adjusted, if anything, or if they're comfortable with this, knowing that the power to legislate is not coming from them. But I sure as heck can listen to her and her organization and whatever they provide. If I think it's reasonable, I think at least I'll be using that as a proposed amendment. And Maybe Ms. Smith will take some of that away as well, and between the two of us, that's the first and the second to amend. Who knows? But that's for us to, I think, get to debating it much further tonight. While I'm enjoying the debate, I don't know if we're going to get anywhere, versus let's take the time in the next 2 weeks to just get it done. But I'll reach out to Sarah if you feel comfortable going with me. So, because I was the one who put her up for the initiative 2 years ago. So, that's my thoughts. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I don't know why Mrs. McBride should be the only one to help decide what's on the ballot. I know she presented a petition, but she didn't get enough signatures. It's you people that decided to put her on the ballot. So I don't think it should be up to her. I'm totally against the chicken. Why can't I have input in it?
You can. Give me a call. Send me an email. Come talk to me after the meeting.
I talked to you here several times.
Yes.
But I haven't seen the new amendment. I had the ordinance for the first time, but the only way I got that is because Tony sent it to me. I'd like to know what you're talking about when you're saying amendment. But she keeps referring to Mrs. McBride. She is not the one. She only got 700 signatures. If you wanted to put it on the ballot, you wouldn't be in this mess. It would have been gone until she got enough signatures.
Or the council could pass it tonight.
Well, that's true. But you're going to have a lot of unhappy people, I can tell you right now. But if you put this advisory thing on there, and we vote it down, I know several people up here that have number one, she'll vote for it. No matter how many people, if 99% of the Huber Heights voted against it, she'll vote for it. Because she deals with Mrs. McBride. I've heard her name. I've heard Mrs. McBride's name so many times, I think she's on city council. So, I will see the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Bethlehem. For those that are watching or those that are internet savvy, the read ahead for this particular agenda item does have the proposed amendment available online. So,
The agenda and the stuff today, I don't see amendment.
that's in the read ahead material. So you have to go onto Agenda Quick and pull it down offline.
I did send it to her.
And
The amended version.
yes, and
You should give me I want to say a tutor on how to read your stuff on the computer.
and yes,
I'd be happy to show you.
yes. Okay, Mr. Otto.
Ms. Kitzinger, I will tell you that from my point of view, I think it's very important that Ms. McBride be involved simply because she is more an expert on this subject matter than we are. And I think that's why her involvement is so important, to make sure that it's crafted so that if it does pass, it'll be crafted properly for those who want it. Now, my personal opinion on it, I can tell you this right here, right now, is that if this goes out for the ballot for an advisory opinion, as Mr. Schaefer has described it, I will follow the will of the people, plain and simple. Whichever side pulls the most votes, that's where I'm at. I just want it to go to a ballot because I believe it deserves a chance, and I actually also believe that I think Ms. McBride got about 1,300 signatures. So again, I think it's just something that deserves consideration by people, and if people choose it, say they don't want it, that's fine. If they say they do, then that's fine too. I think that's fair to me.
1,300 wasn't enough to put it on the ballot.
Yeah, but there's.
I don't make that clear.
Yeah, I know. Thank you.
All right. So we have the proposed amendment with the language to make that, the key part of that would be the advisory portion of that and such. There were a couple other things that go along with that. Have we researched the cost of putting these advisory opinion onto the ballot?
I can't answer that question tonight.
Okay, so we definitely need to do that, especially if it's binding or not binding, and there's certainly water softening is one that I think we should go to anyway, but this might be another one. The other question on this is that Mr. Schaefer did point out that the normal process for a code change is to send it to Planning Commission, get a recommendation from Planning Commission, and then Council decide on it. So we would need to start that process as well, because they would have input on 4 or 6 or 50 feet or 20 feet, I believe, through their process. So what's the plan for that aspect of the requirement?
Well, I think I don't think you can even think about starting that until you get your advisory opinion.
Right.
Then council has to make the decision to go forward, and if the decision to go forward is with the rezoning, then what council will do is recommend to the Planning Commission, because council is one of the entities that can call for a zoning change. Council would recommend to the Planning Commission that it undertake review of this legislation and bring it back to City Council in the normal course of events. And City Council, of course, has the right to accept with conditions, or reject any recommendation that ultimately comes from the Planning Commission.
Yes, and that course of action makes better sense if we're trying to get the issue in for November, because it does. However, the alternate thought that we should get the input from Planning Commission first and then see if that's what the public is in favor of, seems to make sense as well.
Well, it does, but if I'm following Mr. Otto's train of thought, if the vote is against the chickens, you spend a whole lot of time and effort getting an advisory opinion out of the Planning Commission.
Okay. So if we put it on for 4 chickens, and the Planning Commission, certainly they could come in with 6 or 8 if they wanted to.
They
because
could, but keep in mind that the Planning Commission is simply making a recommendation back to Council.
Right.
Council can approve with amendments, or reject. Now, there's some voting criteria there. If you're going to vote to reject or with conditions, there has to be a 2/3 vote one way or another,
right,
as opposed to a majority. But still, Council has that power.
Okay. All right. It's fine. Seems like a workable plan. Council? So we're going to wait till next week for any amendments? Our next meeting? And actually we can discuss any amendments inside the work session as well. So we'll plan on that. Moving on to a 3rd reading. And we did take the takeaway that we want to know how much it costs for each of these.
Yep.
All right, moving on to the next agenda item, which is 11C.
Item 11C, a resolution authorizing the Fire Division to exceed the original 2016 legislated dollar amount for Locution Systems Incorporated, providing computer-aided station alerting for the City of Huber Heights Fire Division, and waiving the competitive bidding process of the 3rd reading.
Thank you very much. Call on Assistant City Manager Scott Bukowski.
Thank you. This is the third reading of this one. As a reminder, this was for the locution systems. This is just for an increase in the not to exceed. This was started, there was a grant awarded to the city that originally started with the locution system. It is a sole source vendor because of that grant, and we're just looking to increase the not to exceed to a total of the $40,000. Part of it is due to the addition of the third station. This is the maintenance contract, and for that portion of it, this is not construction itself.
All right, thank you very much, and this is the third reading. Is there a motion to adopt? Ms. Burge.
Motion to adopt.
Thank you. And Ms. Blankenship.
Second.
Counsel? Ms. Smith?
May I raise a question of privilege, please?
Go ahead.
Thank you. I would like to just clarify, so Mr. Falkowski, if I could ask you to explain to the constituents and the residents why we are waiving the competitive bidding process.
We have an existing contract with Locution that is part of the existing fire stations. This is part of the station alerting system, and that's been there, and we have an ongoing existing contract. The reason to continue with them just to increase is because we are adding the third station. That would be not necessarily feasible to start with a new contractor just for one station that may not speak to the same system. So the reason for that is because we have an existing contract.
Thank you for that information.
Thank you. All right, call the roll, please.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
Mr. Otto?
Yes.
Mrs. Blankenship?
Yes.
Mrs. Burge?
Yes.
Mr. Lyons?
Yes.
Mr. Shaw?
Yes.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Starling?
Yes.
All right, passes 8-0. Moving on to 11D, please read the ordinance.
Item 11D, an ordinance levying renewed and recalculated assessments for a period of 10 years to pay for lighting the unincorporated districts herein described at the third reading.
And call on Assistant City Manager Scott Falkowski for comments.
Yes. This again is a third reading of this item. This is for our street lighting districts to recalculate and renew the assessments for another 10 years for all the unincorporated districts. It's something that we continue to do throughout the city.
Right. Thank you. Motion to adopt. Mr. Otto?
So moved.
Mr. Starline?
Second.
Discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Otto?
Yes.
Mrs. Blankenship?
Yes.
Mrs. Burge?
Yes.
Mr. Lyons?
Yes.
Mr. Shaw?
Yes.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Starline?
Yes.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
And passes 8-0. Moving on to new business. Item 12A, please read the motion.
Item 12A, a motion to approve new liquor permit number 878-221-50135 for R&R Takhar Operations Incorporated at 7851 Old Troy Pike, Huber Heights, Ohio 45424.
And call on Councilmember Tyler Starline for comments.
Yes, this application came to the city. It was reviewed by police and fire, no adverse or opposition. It then went to work session. We reviewed it and no opposition. I would therefore make the motion to approve the new liquor permit.
Thank you. Ms. Smith?
Second.
Discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Blankenship?
Yes.
Mrs. Burge?
Yes.
Mr. Lyons?
Yes.
Mr. Shaw?
Yes.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Starline?
Yes.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
Mr. Otto?
Yes.
And passes 8-0. Moving on to 12B, a public hearing.
Item 12B, a public hearing scheduled for June 13th, 2016 by the Huber Heights City Council for zoning case 16-16. The applicant is New Visions AME Church Incorporated. The applicant is requesting approval of a rezoning from Conservancy C to Planned Public and Private Buildings and Grounds, PP, for property located at 4549 Powell Road, and approval of a basic development plan.
Okay, thank you very much. Before we get started, though, I would like to make a comment about the read-aheads here. I know that there was more information about the properties and the proposed for both this public hearing and the next public hearing, that I think that if somebody had got the notice and wanted to do the research based on what's here in this agenda, that they could have had a lot more included in here, and the resident that doesn't know that it's in previous meetings or to look into read-aheads for previous meetings would know like that. So I think we need to make what we have available to those looking for information based on the idea that this would be relatively new to them, so they wouldn't necessarily go back into previous agendas to look for it. And on that same comment, in the mailings that we put out, do we reference them to anywhere on the site, on the city site, so that they know, or is it just a matter of providing a contact information?
I believe it just references to contact the city for information. So it does not say a specific location like in Agenda Quick that it would be.
Yeah, and that would be kind of hard to put in there as well, but we could mention that it does exist. So when we say contact the city, and we can point you to places online where you can find more information or something.
And you know, when it starts, the first time that it goes out, it's not online. It's not in Agenda Quick yet before it even gets to Planning Commission. So that process. So that initial mailer, basically contacting us, and then they can either come in and look at them here, or we can email, or however.
Right, and whoever's answering the questions, when they get the questions, can point them that way as well.
At the point in time when it is on a committee or something like that, you can point in that direction as well.
Thank you very much. And so now we will open a public hearing as read by the clerk of the council. And I call on Scott Pikowski.
Thank you. 4549 Powell Road. The location is the old Wayne Swim Club site. That site had sold to a private entity, and they are looking at selling the property again. The proposal, the proposed user that is looking to purchase this property is looking to build a worship and life center, which will be used for church services in addition to community ministry and outreach. This is a rezoning. The existing site is zoned Conservancy, which exists a pool site as it was before fits within. This would be a rezoning to Planned Public and Private Buildings and Grounds, which is where all of our churches, schools, community, government centers, those kind of things, parks, all fit within that category. So this does fit within that Planned Public and Private Buildings and Grounds. They are looking to renovate the whole site, a combination of utilizing some of the existing structures with the addition of some new. They are looking to fill in the pool that is there now and basically build a playground in that area, utilize the existing parking up front. There is an existing shelter with a small little kitchen and restroom next to it. They are looking at that as kind of their phase one of enclosing that structure to use for their worship space until they are ready to come forward with the larger center that would be similar to a gymnasium and have those aspects in it, along with some office space and meeting rooms and classrooms, those kind of things. So they are looking to phase this. This is just a request for the rezoning and the basic development plan. the next step for them would be come forward to Planning Commission for the detailed development plan. So this request does not involve the final engineering. That is something that will come at a later date. Basically, they're asking for the approval of the use of the site. Also, as you can see, there is existing over on the eastern portion of the site is more of the, we'll call it the recreational aspects, some walking trails, tennis courts, basketball courts, those kind of things, trying resurfacing some of the existing and then adding on to those, adding some shelters, little picnic shelters. They are looking at trying to, say, open the site to the neighborhood. There's not a lot of parks down in that area, and they feel there can be some community outreach to allow people to come use the site that doesn't have to be part of their church, just to be able to access the children and everything of the neighborhood, give them something to do. From the engineering end of things, they will be expanding the parking lot, the driveways to the new building, extending water to it. There is existing water to the site. One of the main issues is the drainage of the site. The drainage falls, and the majority of it falls to the north. There is an existing private road, Rest Haven Drive at the north. They are not proposing to have any kind of public access to it. There is a gate there now, but that would just be an emergency gate. At the Planning Commission, there was concern about the drainage on the site, that anything they do there is going to make the problem worse. But through the detailed development plan, they will submit the calculations and design for a detention basin located somewhere in the northern region to handle any of the increased flows that come off the site. That is per our engineering specifications, that they are not allowed to have more water leave the site than currently does now, and that there's an existing low area there that kind of floods a little bit during the heavy rains, so they'll address that during that process. So basically to totally improve the situation even as it sits right now. They have an example building that they're looking at for the church/gymnasium to basically use as a multi-purpose center. And then it shows kind of the inside, so you can have the gymnasium portion throughout the week to allow for the neighborhood and the community to come and use it, and then also have the little community rooms for little classrooms or little meeting rooms, those kind of things. So they are requesting that this does get rezoned to planned public and private buildings and grounds. And they are here tonight as well.
Okay. Thank you very much. Is there a representative from the New Visions AME Church that would like to make comments?
Good evening. My name is Reverend J.D. Grigsby Jr., and you know the preacher always going to have something to say. I'm pretty well meditated as far as being I may have a meditation to stand before you, listen to the discussion of chickens and things of that nature. That kind of medicated me a little bit to stand before you relaxed and with the joy that only comes through Jesus Christ. This has been an experience for me, and it's very informative. But I'm ready to go to work. We can't even do anything yet until we can say this is our land. And my hope this evening is that you approve the request, because I will follow the engineer's proposed, when we had the meeting, what he proposed. And it seems to me, If you don't know about what you're doing, I know how to preach, I know how to love people, I know how to lift people up, I know how to redirect people, I know how to tell people where they can get some help, because if someone created you, he can reshape you and remold you, okay? I can do all those things. But as far as this new venue, I have to adhere to the guidelines and the step-by-steps that this commission requires of me. So it's a step-by-step thing for me. And getting the detention pond, who wants to try to build on something that's going to flood at least 5 acres? It's common sense. You want to make sure you get that done, okay? And as far as opening up to the public, it's open to the public, but the public must remember that it's holy ground. And knowing that comes different types of attitudes and behaviors. And with that being said, I just appreciate, like I said last week, I appreciate the job you do. And I've always been an individual of appreciation and thankfulness. I think that will carry you a long way, appreciating the people that's in your lives and the people that have an opportunity to help elevate and allow you to maximize your purpose here on this earth. And as you decide on approval or disapproval, remember, you will always be a part of this vision and a part of allowing me to meet my purpose on this earth. And that is to mold and shape and change the lives of people, change the thought processes, because people don't wake up wanting to be a prostitute. People don't wake up saying, I'm going to be a dope pusher. People don't wake up saying that I want to drop out of school. It all goes with, as a man thinking in his heart, that is he. God bless you.
Thank you. And call on Alan Schaefer to make comments or provide additional information.
This matter was well vetted at the work session, and of course we had a much more comprehensive presentation, Pastor. Thank you very much for that. And so it's ready to move forward. There's legislation, I believe, in the package for tonight. And so, unless there's any questions.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other representatives of City of Huber Heights that would like to make additional comments? Mr. Otto.
Mr. Grigsby, I would like to say that any time we can provide additional outlets for our youth, especially in a nice supervised, protected area like you're speaking of, I think we need to provide every opportunity to do so. Our kids are especially needing guidance in these days. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you. Mr. Starling.
I have a couple of fact questions that I'd like to ask so that you can help provide me with some information tonight so that it's part of our record. Is there any intention of having anyone reside at this property, or is it simply for holding church and other activities, but no one actually residing on the property?
Well, really, not at this point. And it's just like, just say for instance, if you just say, if I feel like I just want to stay there that night, just meditate, whatever, I may do that. But as far as a set standard, no, we're not planning on having anyone to live or stay there.
Working like burning the midnight oil, I'm not so worried about it. Someone that would be consistently residing on the property. I know some churches have a residence as part of the building where either a groundskeeper or a pastor may reside on there, and I'm just making sure I understood that you had no intention for someone to stay there on a consistent long-term basis.
Not at this point. It's just, as things move forward, you got to adjust with what, if something is going on that we may feel that needs to be monitored, then maybe we will look into until we get an answer of what's going on. something of that nature, but that's pretty much.
Okay.
And I know on some portions of the property, there are some good wooded areas and all of that. Is it the church's intention to, as much as possible, maintain those wooded areas and all of that?
I'm just going to share with you, just like I try to tell, like I share with my wife, the things that I do, I want it to be displayed like God had a hand on it. So that means neat, areas well taken care of, and looking really nice and beautiful.
Okay. And just addressing the hours of usage, the Planning Commission had recommended that any outdoor activities have a time frame. Obviously, anything inside being less likely to be loud and be heard by the neighbors, because there are residences around that property. You all are aware and perfectly comfortable going along with that, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay.
We're trying to build relationships, and
to the best of your knowledge, you don't expect any additional impact on either our police forces or medical personnel or anything like that, do you?
Absolutely not. This is not my first rodeo as far as dealing with youth, and as I shared with you earlier, I've dealt with some of the worst youth that's in Montgomery County, and I shared that, And, I don't mind confronting in a loving way. I'm not afraid of the world in which I live.
Like I said, I was asking these fact questions because I wanted to make sure that we put it out on record. I hadn't anticipated that these were the answers, but I wanted to ask because I'm considering what's in front of us in terms of our code, and I wanted to make sure that we made the record clear from tonight. So I appreciate you taking the time to answer my questions, and I appreciate the presentation that you made at Planning Commission. It was a very informative presentation at that point as well. So thank you, Pastor, and to everyone else that's been with you. That's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Ms. Burge.
Reverend Grigsby, you have a wonderful vision here. I look forward to it coming to fruition. But I have to tell you, I'm very, very concerned about that swimming pool and the safety of the children that will be going there. I hope somewhere in the near future you will fill it in.
First thing,
Part of phase one.
phase one.
It is phase one, okay, I thought we were going into phase two.
I can't swim either.
Well, I'm more concerned with somebody falling in. The other thing that you might think about somewhere along the line is, since you will conceivably be having a large number of children and adults, young adults in there, it might be a good idea to have some security cameras posted for your benefit and for the surrounding community.
Thanks for your suggestion. We can do that.
Mr. Tyler.
I should have known I would forget one. At Planning Commission, you answered this question, but just for discussion here, do you feel that financially you are going to be able to move forward on this and complete? You had mentioned at Planning Commission that you would start some work right away, but also be working on fundraising and all of that. Is it still your feel that you'll be able to complete what you start and follow through to completion on the whole project?
Okay, absolutely. Thank you. We got to go in phases. Understood. Understood.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr.
All right, thank you. Are there any people present who wish to speak in favor of the approval of the issue? Sir.
Mr. Fillon, I've lived here for quite a few years, but I can't place where this 4549, is that at the corner of Powell and 202? Or I'm up this way too far?
To the east.
Are you familiar with the old swim club?
Yeah, I know where the house, but it used to be, is it still in the housing area? Or am I up this way too far? It's on the other side of 202?
On the east side of 202, and it's the old swim club property. So it's down probably quarter to half a mile off of 202. To the
going towards the river?
No, away from the river. Away from.
I'm an old country boy. I get turned around easy. I get in the city, man. I get all messed up.
It's more of the residential area.
You're still in the residential area?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Leave Old Troy, start heading towards Brant, and you're just in. That's going east. So
Past piece of it.
yeah, past.
Past piece of it.
Oh, okay. Now, if you'd said south, I know where he's going. Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you much. Okay.
And are there any others that wish to speak in favor of the proposal? Are there any people present who wish to speak against the proposal, against the approval of the issue? Okay. Call on members of the Heber Heights City Council to make or provide any additional information. Okay. One last time, is there any person present who wishes to speak in favor of or against the approval of the issue? Barring further comments, then the public hearing for this by the City Council for Planning Commission case ZC 16-C-16 is hereby closed. All right, and moving on to the next public hearing.
Item 12C, a public hearing scheduled for June 13th, 2016 by the Heber Heights City Council for zoning case 16-23. The applicant is the City of Heber Heights. The applicant is requesting approval of a major change to the previously approved basic and detailed development plans to amend zoning case 11-01 to add a pedestrian entrance to the Heber Heights Recreation and Activity Center located at the northwest corner of Brant Pike and Shaw Road.
Thank you very much. Call on Assistant City Manager Scott Filkowski to make the initial presentation.
Thank you. The request today is for a major change to the development plan for the Aquatic and Recreation Center that's located basically behind the Y at the corners of Shaw and Brant. Back when this was originally approved, as part of the original approval and part of the ordinance that was approved, is that a pedestrian access off of Charles Gate was prohibited. So from that, a fence was put along that western property line, and then there was a gap in the fence along the treat area, which has since then we have added more fence to that. As part of the history, part of the discussion of why that was put into place of restricting that access, there were some concerns from the neighborhood. Part of it was preservation of existing yard privacy, the reduction of potential for sound and visual impacts, trash, safe environment for neighbors and users, and possibly a parking in the neighborhood for people that would use it and then walk over to the aquatic center. Through the years, there's been quite a few things done at the site that have from concerns from the neighbors. A lot of those dealt with the noise. Some others dealt with some of the visual and safety impacts. There has the mound was built a little higher than the original proposal. There's been more trees planted almost every year in addition, and if you go out there today, they are now to that point of their blending together. So on top of that mound, you'd have a hard time just walking to the other side of the mound now. So from the initial plantings, they are now finally growing up to that some of the more mature areas. Some of the concerns of cutting through the neighbor's houses through their properties. There were a couple instances of cutting through and then jumping the fence. That is part of, with this proposal, of that would cut down on that if there was an official access. There was people that would cut through the wooded area, which, as we said, we have added more fencing to the north, but there still was some that would go down to the creek line and come around. There have been reports of people climbing the fence at the gate that is there. So this addresses some of those concerns to actually have a public access. This was brought forward by a member of the public and then by the commission of council that requested that this go through the process, which started at Planning Commission. And we did look at all the aspects of how this would affect. The proposal itself is, it's a little hard to read up there, but the little green space is just extending the public sidewalk that is on Charles Gate to the fence line. That would be a concrete sidewalk, and it will meet all specifications of a city street sidewalk. Once it gets to the fence line, there will be a space cut into the fence for the access, and then extended to the existing drive would be an asphalt walkway. Just a little closer view, just so basically extending from the existing walkway at the street, connecting to the existing drive path that's part of the emergency access for the park itself. Another one of the stipulations is that we will be adding a trash can at that location on the inside of the fence line, as part of the concern is about trash in the neighborhood, that we're trying to give them every opportunity to throw trash away before they leave the site. This shows you where the location is. You can see there's 2 posts there, so that is the location. There are 2 trees right behind it on the park side of the fence that will need to be removed, that we will make every attempt to relocate and replant as possible, but they are 5-year-old trees, so that they may not survive the transplanting process. There was a discussion at Planning Commission about the parking, and it was decided by the Planning Commission that they would like to see how this goes. If it does move forward, there was a possible proposal of having parking by permit, and they saw that as that could also hinder the residents that live there as well. So the idea that people will park here and walk to the aquatic center or utilize the park, it's closer to park in the parking lot to get to the front entrance of the aquatic center. So we're thinking that there shouldn't be that much of an issue with people parking in this area and then walking through. The majority of it is for the people that live in that neighborhood and live nearby that don't want to walk all the way down to Shaw or send their kids down to Shaw and then access the park. At the Planning Commission meeting, there was one gentleman that did speak on the case that he is in favor of this because he lives in the condos to the north that has a child who had to go down to Shaw Road to catch a bus where they could have caught the bus on Charles Gate itself, so it saw that as a safer route. Did receive also a phone call from a neighbor within 3 houses there that is all for this, that want to utilize the site to go walking and that kind of thing. That has been the only citizen input that has been provided to staff.
Mr. Schaefer.
Scott, in the Planning Commission process, what sort of notice was given?
We did notify a 500-foot radius that was sent out prior to Planning Commission. There are postcards that go out that described what the case was and when the meeting was, and then another one went out that had the date of the committee meeting and the city council meeting.
And is 500 typical?
Our code says 200. We went 500 to get more of the majority of the area.
Thank you. And Ms. Smith.
Thank you. Mr. Falkowski, can you explain to me, I know that when this was brought up about a month ago, there was a financial implications, but here it says there's not. Can you tell me what the cost associated to it and where we're going to get the funds for that?
The total cost would be under $3,000. This would be out of the Parks and Recreation Fund, as this is a benefit to the park itself.
And do we have funds available for that?
There is funds in the current budget for that, and also a portion of this can be done by the Public Works Department.
All right, call on any other representative of the City of Huber Heights to make comments or provide additional information.
Can you bring up your site map, please, Scott? I'm lost on where that little piece is. Where is that little green piece on the map?
The upper left-hand corner. That's where Charles Gate dead ends into the park.
There's a little green dot up there, Mr. Deek.
There's going to be access there. What's going to prevent people from parking there?
It's a public street. They can park there today.
And right now it's closed?
Yeah. The gate is closed. There's an emergency access gate that's in the street itself that is closed and locked. This is a request for an opening at the sidewalk extension. So just for pedestrians.
Because correct me if I'm wrong, what was it, last year or something? It was discussed because of the noise and everybody was parking there to go to the concert place, the amphitheater, and there was always people parking along that day, and it was taking away from the neighborhood feeling.
We have not received complaints about people parking there today. Now that since it's been closed, when this was first proposed 5 years ago, that was a concern that people would park there and then utilize the Aquatic Center. But there has been plenty of parking on site and overflow parking at the Y as well available.
Just 1 second. Ms. Smith.
Mr. Falkowski, I just wanted to make sure that 5 years ago when this was initiated, did the city make promises to the residents that they would not open that gate for access? I just want to make sure that we're not going back on promises that we've made previously.
The ordinance was approved for the rezoning of this property that stated that there is not pedestrian access off Charles Gate. There were no promises that it could never be changed again or never be brought up for discussion.
And was that made clear to the people that I'm just asking for clarification?
Well, that's similar to every property in the city. It can be brought up for a major change or a rezoning if there is, a private entity could bring it up for whatever reason they want. And this council decided to move forward with this process to have that discussion. But I cannot say exactly any conversations 5 years ago.
Mr. Schaefer, did you have a comment? Mr. Shaw.
Thank you. Scott, just a couple of quick questions. Some of these to which I already know the answer, but more for folks in the audience and listening at home. Do we have any other city parks in the city that have residential access to them?
All of them.
So we currently have other city parks that have access to a community street. With that being said, do we have a currently abundant amount of complaints or any complaints right now about cars being parked there or any type of riff-raff, quote-unquote?
The complaints over the years have not been about parking. There have been about jumping the fence and going through the wooded area that has now been closed. On that, it's been about jumping the fence has been the majority of, and when I say majority, the amount of police calls from before the property was built to after has remained the same.
Okay.
In number.
So I guess my next question, and you kind of alluded to this earlier, from all of the notifications that the city has went kind of beyond the call of duty to make, the publications of this meeting and prior meetings, is it, in your opinion, and a factual statement that there's only been one resident that's come out to speak on this, and that was for approval?
One came to the meeting and one called on the phone. So,
has there been any official email received by your office, engineering office, planning commission, or at any of these meetings that I may not be aware of that a resident has not been satisfied or does not want to see this move forward?
Not to my knowledge.
Thank you.
Mr. Otto?
A real quick one. Scott, Ms. Smith asked about funding for this, and you said it come through Parks and Rec. Would that come through the fenced Parks and Rec budget, or just is there a general? I know we got a split between fenced and unfenced. I assume this falls into the fenced Parks and Recreation.
The specific portion of the Parks and Rec budget is the general Parks and Rec.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Starling.
I've heard from residents, particularly ones that live right across the fence, who have over the years been the ones concerned about this development in their backyard. And they are the ones that I recall talking with this council significantly when the ordinance that Mr. Falkowski brought up was dealt with at that time. And it may not be a full and binding legal contract or expressly made agreement, but I think that it is their understanding, and I believe it was the understanding of the council at the time, that an effort to compromise on some of the concerns that the residents had versus some of the wishes that the council had, since we're the owner, that there was no walkway. The fence was complete. The fence was made so that there was no pedestrian access. And I think that that promise should be kept. I would love to see access, but that being said, we made a promise years ago, and I think that promises made should be promises kept. And more specifically, I think it's disingenuous to say, well, no one's been parking over there since the fence has been complete. We haven't had those complaints because, of course, they're not parking over there. There's no walkway. They would have to jump the fence, and most people won't jump the fence. But if there is no fence at that walkway, they will park there. And I understand that the parking lot that is specifically designed for the aquatic center is much closer than that platted area. But when it gets busy, like it did on Saturday, my family and I, we parked over by the Y because there was not any spaces whatsoever in the aquatic center. And since we want the aquatic center to be busy and profitable and we want Mother Nature to play nice with us, that means there's going to be folks parking over there, which means it would be actually
physically closer to park on the streets than to walk over. So I appreciate everything that you've said, and I'm not saying that anything is outright wrong. I'm not. But I think that this was a specific discussion amongst the council and the residents at that time, and we reached an understanding, even if it's not by contract. And while, yes, we have the power to change it because we have the power to change the ordinances, that doesn't mean we should. And I would suggest that this council not change this now and essentially change our word from what we gave 5 years ago. So that's my input.
Ms. Blankenship.
How many people are you talking about, Tyler? How many residents?
Some. 2, 10, 20. I can't give you an exact count, but that's something I'm planning on going and working on. But the thing is that if we made promises to all the residents, by passing that ordinance and including that language, even if they have not personally spoken up, they should be able to have relied on that and act accordingly. So, it may be 20 people now who are speaking up to say, stop going against what you told us, but because we passed this with those conditions in mind, we told every single resident that this is what this city council planned to do. So the final answer to your question is 38,000 and change. We promised all of them that this is what we would do.
No, we didn't. Not to all of the people. It was in that agreement right there by the thing, because there were a couple people that disagreed with having them come through, and people have been climbing over the fence, which this would help that situation. I'm not saying we shouldn't do that, but we have had people come forward that want the walk now that they've been without it. Now they want it, they've changed their mind. So to the two that are yelling no, to the two that are yelling yes, we're listening to both of them. And so that's what we have to decide tonight, the fair way to move forward. And I agree with keeping our word, but on the other hand, if situations change, which they do in our life from time to time, and over 5 years it could change, those people, did they specifically say they did not want it definitely? Is that what you're telling me that you heard? I didn't hear from anyone.
Oh, yes.
From anyone.
Oh, yes. There are several residents that do not want any pedestrian access from the residential area into that complex at all.
But they won't be, is it because they're afraid of the car traffic? Is that the main thing? Because they really won't be able to get in their property or anything still because they can't.
The vehicles, the trash, the concern for inviting possible vandalism, because with a walkway now established, people that have walked the area can then go in and out. And I'm not saying I'm 100% convinced by what I'm saying this is what they are conveying to me of their concerns.
Okay, I hadn't heard anything, so that's why I was just trying to get more information, exactly what people had passed on to you. Thanks.
Mr. Shaw.
I just had a quick question, and this is maybe for Tony or for Scott or even Alan. If anybody can supply me or has maybe a mindset of any meeting minutes or ordinances that's been put out there that's used the word promise, that maybe I can get a copy of, that went back in time for this, because all the history that I've read on this, and that I haven't seen that word promise. And I haven't seen that word guarantee. So I was just hoping that somebody could shine some light on that, because I didn't vote on this. I didn't make any promises. I didn't make any legislation. So I'm coming at this with a new set of eyes. So if maybe somebody can help me with a little of that history on that.
Ms. Blankenship.
That just brought to mind, when you say promises, we also have ordinances against barnyard animals, so now we're wanting to change it. And that's what I'm saying. Things change. So, you know, when we built this whole city, this was our ordinances. This was what we had. This was the whole city had the same ordinances that we do not have barnyard animals. So now we're wanting to change it. Okay, maybe we will, maybe we won't. It's up to the people. So that's what I'm saying. Is that a promise? When you move into an area, all your new subdivisions all have all these covenants that they can't have it. What's going to happen to those covenants?
And Ms. Starling.
Alan, is this something that we could also do an advisory ballot issue on and get the input of the people?
Yes,
If we're talking about there's been promises made and promises kept and we don't know and how many are there, how better to get that information, my good colleague Ms. Blankenship, than to take it out to the ballot and let the people overall tell us their opinion.
I think that's why they elected us to do a certain amount of work for them, to get the ideas and to discuss it and do the pros and cons and hear from people and then make the final decision. I don't think everything has to go to the voter. We never accomplish anything.
So does that apply to chickens? Does that apply to water softening? Does that apply to water pressure? And how do we decide which one's which?
By what we discuss and go through. That's the process.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Is there any member of the public present that wishes to speak in favor of the issue? Go ahead.
Exactly. My point is, wow, that was my name is Mary Thomas. I'm a pretty big mouth, so normally that's not an issue. While I'm not necessarily opposed or in favor, I strongly feel the need to point out that while the word guaranteed or promises may or may not have been in there, certain things are implied. I live in the Gates. This is our second home in Huber Heights, and unfortunately, it will be the last, because certain things have occurred that has made the area not as pleasurable to live in. Noise, very similar issues with the dead end there at Watergate, the field, and continuing on to Charlesgate. It's very important that when a citizen makes a decision to buy a property in Huber, they buy it based on the information they have at that time. There is changes in life constantly. Nothing we can do about that. But it's extremely important to listen to what the people who elected you and put you here, and may I comment, I'm very happy to see a lot of new faces since I was here last. It's very important to listen to what your people want. I wish I was here about chickens. I'm not, and I guess I'll table my specific thing. I've had chickens in my backyard. People behind me. I live in Watergate Drive. Chickens are not needed at Watergate Drive. Be that as it may, everybody has a right to be heard, and I strongly support that. But when you tell a person that votes, this is what's going to happen, they tend to hold you at your word. And I just want to stress how important that is. Thank you.
Mr. Deek, are you speaking in favor?
Neither, because it doesn't affect my house. When I moved to Huber Heights when I retired, I ran 7 major installations. We put a fence up to keep people out. I look at this, and I'm saying, I built my house on a cul-de-sac. That means I have no through traffic. Why did I want that? Peace of mind. To keep everybody out that doesn't need to be there and just roaming the streets looking for something to do, whether it's good or bad. But I look at that If I was anywhere around that, just like in college, if you remember, why the heck is there a sidewalk from that building to that building? That's because it's the shortest place to go from point A to point B. Now, you probably never had a lot of people do that, and I commend Rich, you know, did anybody complain? It's human nature. If you live there and you open that up, and just like on a busy day that Tyler said, I guess this weekend, there's no parking spaces. People are going to know where the slots are. Guess what's going to happen? They're going to be parking on the street, and I agree with you, Scott, it's a public street. It's a public street in front of my house, too. But let me tell you, you're having a community environment on one side of the fence. On that day that you have a busy day, there's no parking spaces, and he parked over at the Y, think of what that neighborhood's going to look like. Think of what that neighborhood's going to look like. And say, if Janelle lived over there, I don't think you live over there, but you live somewhere else over there. If you lived there and you had a wedding party, her daughter's getting married, I think, and you had a bunch of people come over, where in God's creation are they going to park? Because they take it for granted that you're parking on that street because you're going to go to someone that lives on that street. Not to park there all day, right, wrong, or indifferent, and walk between the thing for that $3,000 path. If I was living there, I would be livid. I've experienced it. Look at colleges. You start wondering why they have X's and double X's all over the place, because that's where the students walk. They're going to walk whether they're there or not. They're going to make the path. You give them the opportunity, guess what? Everybody's going to jump on it. They're going to take the point of least resistance. And I commend Scott for going through it. I commend your comments, Rich. And I commend yours, Tyler. It's a throughput, and it's just asking for trouble. I'm not saying no one's perfect, but it's going to ask for trouble. Imagine, I'm working out, if I had that house right there and I'm working in my backyard, it's fenced in, I have my garage open, and I'm coming back and forth, and I get delayed for 20 minutes, and I usually go back and forth getting something out of the garage. The garage is unoccupied. Oh, look at that. I might want that. Not saying it's going to happen, but you're feeding to the frenzy. You know, we still have people, even on our cul-de-sac. I have the police chief living 5 houses down. And we still have people, because it's a new construction zone still for new housing, we still have people going up and down the streets that have absolutely no business. They're looking for something. What are they looking for? Beats the heck out of me unless you put something out front that you're going to throw away and they might want to salvage it. That's fine. But you have garage doors open. You're creating something that I don't think you want to try to correct after it's been done. Think about it from college or anywhere else. It's the point of least resistance, and that's exactly what's going to happen. You've just extended your parking lot for the pool. And if I came on a busy day, I'd be the first one to admit that I would park in the housing area because first, there's less traffic because there's only a finite spot that you can park on between curbs and places to go up the driveway. You can't park in front of mailboxes because it's federal law, and you can't park in front of driveways. But there's a lot of different spots. You know, someone wants to clean out their garage. They want to park their stuff out. What are they going to do? They can't do it now. You know, you have to think of the homeowner, whether they complain, right, wrong, or indifferent, you got to think about the neighborhood. You've just opened it up to a public circus.
Thank you, Mr. Leek. I think that would have been more appropriate for the speaking against, but Mr. Otto.
Yeah, Ron, I would like to speak to the comments about the path of least resistance and considering the neighbors. I think this subject is going to get continued discussion as it needs. But I went one morning with Mr. Campbell and Mr. Falkowski and Mr. Schomer, and we spoke to the neighbor directly next to the proposed gate. And that neighbor would like something like that because currently the path of least resistance is through their yard. And that bothers them quite a bit. And that concerns them quite a bit. So, I mean, when we're factoring in neighbors, we got to factor in those as well. And I think the most impacted person is that one right there next to that proposed gate. Again, we've got a lot of discussion, but we got a lot of people to listen to.
You know, I hear you, Glenn. It's just that, you know, even in where I live, I have a half acre. The point of least resistance for munchkins to go from one house to the other when everything wasn't built up was through my yard. Guess what I did? I put up a 552-foot fence. Yeah, it cost me a big nickel, but guess what? I have peace and quiet and privacy with 23 trees that I planted. Leave me the heck alone. And I commend that gentleman.
Living right next to it are wanting some peace and privacy as well.
Right, and there's give and take on it all. But I look at it, you know, it's going to be what was it? When did you go to the pool? Saturday. I bet you it would have been a zoo on that road, or the ones adjoining it. You know, and then people that have there and friends want to come over, they have nowhere to park. Say you want to have a little lawn party, all of a sudden there's nowhere to park.
We can postulate on what could be for days.
Oh, absolutely.
But we do know what is currently, and we got to factor some of those things in as well.
Okay, thank you. And I actually was at that meeting, and I don't know that I heard that that gentleman was for the gate being open to help keep the traffic off there. I think when the area was cut down, it made it a lot easier for him. But I'm certain he has concerns about the gate being open himself and the parking issue and such. I'm not sure that he's actually an advocate for it.
I wouldn't say he's an advocate, but they did voice their concerns with the traffic going through their yard. And he really didn't seem to be overly one way or the other, honestly. He just wanted this people not going through his yard.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Any? Yeah. Are you for? I'm trying to keep some semblance.
I'm Ron Brenner. I live at 6090 Honeygate, and the entrance to Honeygate Park, the entrance to Showgate Park off Honeygate goes right past the side of my house. And I can tell you from my experiences, the biggest thing they have there, they don't have it this year because I guess Little League's shrinking again, I don't know. But when they played Little League on the ball diamonds behind my house, Honeygate runs just one block long from Charles Gate around the school gate. And when there's a Little League game, there's nowhere to park on that entire block on the street. Rest of the time, no problem. But whenever there's an event going on in the park, you ain't going to park on that street nowhere. You're not going to do nothing. You're lucky if you can get in and out of your driveway. But like he said, if I've lived over there, what we have done at Showgate Park, the people that want access to the park that live there, we put our own gates in the fence, going direct out of our backyards into the park. And there's a fence down the entryways to where people just, all they can do is go back and forth through it. So what that guy that you're talking about, he needs to put up a better fence around his yard if they open that thing up, or even if they don't. Most of the parks, I don't remember that the city put up any kind of a fence between the property line and the park. You can just simply walk out of your backyard if you don't put a fence up yourself, and everybody else can run through there. So most of us all have fences across our backyards, and when we put the fence in, if we wanted access direct out of our backyard into the park, we put our own gate in. You know,
Thank you.
if I was them people, I'd be awful excited because it's not like Little League that only goes for 2 months a year and then you're done with it and don't go every night. That goes all summer.
Sir?
Real quick, Stan Leeds. I was initially for, and I'm pretty much still for it and everything like that. But I heard good points and everything like that. My question would be, barring money, obviously, on re-engineering, what about a gate fence where either you have a swing gate so it can be secured at other times, or when it's deemed that it's not useful anymore, put a gate there, you know, close it up and everything like that, and it becomes you got the emergency drive-through, but you also got an emergency walk-through gate. Might be something to think about too.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Smith?
And thank you for those comments. This was my proposal, and my original proposal was that we somehow have somebody within the city or maybe the Y, but then I read the Y's contract and I realized that they cannot be held contractually obligated to open and close that gate. What I'm hearing from the Ward 2 residents that live up to that line is that they would like to have access like all the other parks so that they can walk the walking trails. This wasn't introduced so that people could get a quick, easy ride to the aquatic center. Mr. Lyons, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I have a question for you, sir, because this also has to do with your ward. Were you invited to the meeting by any chance? Because I wasn't invited to the meeting, and I know with this being my proposal, I didn't get to speak to the residents that the other people did. So were you involved in any of this discussion?
No, ma'am, I was not. I found out after the fact. As it turned out, I would not have been able to attend, but it would have been nice to have notice since it would have, as you mentioned, been in both of our wards.
Okay, thank you. You know, that's all I have to say, I guess.
Ms. Blankenship?
Mr. Deeks, thank you. You made my memory come back here about something. I live on a cul-de-sac also, and it's right, St. Peter's is at the end of the street, so it's a dead end right there on Corsica. And so you did joggle my memory, because when they had their festival every year, people parked completely up and down both sides of the street. It's just a weekend, so I give you that, and this is all the time. I mean, people could come in there in winter and walk around if they'd like to, or fall. So I still feel for the people that are running it. I mean, you know, because there are always pro and con to everything, and we have to look at both sides. But I just wanted to acknowledge that. We do, because I'd have company and they did not have a place to park on our street. So I do recall that, and so that brought it back.
Yeah, because I don't live over there, but I'm just looking at it from a comprehensive plan. I'm saying whether the gentleman on the corner lot at the first spot, right where that trail would be, doesn't care. What if it was a different homeowner, you know, and they needed it? It's just that person living there and that spot doesn't have a problem with it. You have to look at it much larger than those immediate houses. You have to look at it from a comprehensive plan, is what happens 1,000 feet from there. You know, yeah, the pool is only open for, 3-4 months out of the year. But then you have the amphitheater, and you have open concert things that we were even talking. You had the presentation about the noise and the bass and everything. You know, people were, I think there was more talk along that road. They can't have, on a nice summer day, have their doors open because they hear the thump, the thump, 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 thump. I mean, you remember talking about that about a couple years ago or something like that. Each one of these things has a consequence. And think about all of the residents and not just the one. It's the point of least resistance, as you said, it's the point of least resistance.
But we are listening. That's what was my point also. It isn't that we aren't listening. We're very compassionate about listening to people. But when you have divided, then we have to make a decision based on the best. So we will come to that. But I mean, it's a good discussion. I hate to prolong it, but that joggled me. Thank you.
And Mr. Falkowski, at one time the Planning Commission was considering recommending that the parking there be permit only for residents. Could you go over again what their reasoning was, why they didn't make that recommendation?
Yes. That was in the original staff report provided to Planning Commission as addressing all of the original concerns that were brought up 5 years ago by the neighbors about each one that was brought up. Here is a solution to that was brought forward. So parking by permit was brought forward. Planning Commission removed that from the decision record in their recommendation to City Council. Their thought was that may restrict the homeowners in the area more than it helps them. As one thing's brought up, if somebody wants to have a party of their own that blocks other people's front of their houses as well, they may not be able to do that. They may not be able to have a party at their house or a gathering, family gathering, because there wouldn't be enough parking passes to go around for their family. So they wanted to, their recommendation is to move forward without that and then revisit it if there are complaints. Bring it back through the process, and then we can go to that. There is that down at the high school. Prior to the renovations, there wasn't enough parking on site, basically, so people were parking next to the high school, so they set up the permit system there. So we have precedent that can be done.
Okay. And this was just not included in the recommendation. It wasn't permitted by their, it wasn't the opposite of permitted.
Precluded.
Precluded, yes. Precluded by their decision. So if council decided to add a restriction in...
Council could amend however they would like.
Well, it wouldn't go against the Planning Commission itself, and so it would just take a normal 5 vote.
They want to add restrictions, Alan? Is that a...
Well, this is a major change.
Yes.
And the Planning Commission recommends, and if council approves, then it's a majority vote. If council approves with exceptions or denies, it's a 2/3 vote.
Right. So it wouldn't be a denial. It would be an addition of a parking.
An additional restriction.
Yeah.
That way.
Right. So would that take a 2/3 vote, or would that take a 5 vote if you add something additional in?
No, it would only take a majority vote if all of council agrees to the recommendation from the Planning Commission.
Right. And there was no...
The recommendation is to do this, then it only requires a 5 majority vote.
He's
Right.
asking about a modified recommendation.
They want to add an additional restriction.
Yeah, then it would require a 2/3 vote.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. So what's the normal process now for putting a no parking area in? Does the council approve all those?
That goes to the engineering department for review and final approval, also through the streets department, and final approval by the city manager for signing.
So council, for most no parking areas in the city, council doesn't approve those.
Typically, no, unless there was a specific area wanted to be set up by council.
So that was
back then. I have no idea how that was.
that was brought to council, and council did. Yeah. So are there other permit areas in the city that have been set up other than the high school?
I don't know of any that were parking by permit only. No.
I
don't believe there are any.
Would we expect that to be the same process as a no parking or a no standing area?
That would be the recommendation of staff, is to have council input on that.
Okay. All right. Thanks. All right. That was all the people who spoke for, interestingly, the way this meeting's going. Are there any people that wish to speak against the issue, the approval of the issue? No? And any other council member have any further input? Okay. One last time, is there any person present who wishes to speak in favor or against the approval of the issue? As such, we will close the barring further comments, then the public hearing by the City Council for Planning Commission case ZC 16-23 is hereby closed. All right. Moving on to 12D. Please read the ordinance.
Item 12D, an ordinance to approve a rezoning from C Conservancy to PP Planned Public-Private Buildings and Grounds for property located at 4549 Powell Road, and to approve a basic development plan, zoning case 16-16 at the first reading.
Okay, thank you very much. Call on Assistant City Manager Scott Flakowski for comments.
We had the public hearing on this earlier, and this did go to Planning Commission. Planning Commission unanimously recommended approval of this, and the applicant is requesting to waive the second and third readings if there were no other concerns, so they can be moving forward.
Thank you very much. And call on Councilmember Mark Campbell for comments.
Yes, Mayor. This was presented to the committee, and the committee did recommend to waive both readings. So I would move to waive the second, third readings.
Thank you very much. Mr. Shaw.
I second.
Discussion. Mr. Starling.
Just because for my purposes I want to cover the bases after hearing all of the discussion at the public hearing and everything else. I've looked specifically at what is governed in our codified ordinances regarding revising or, rezoning and the things that we're supposed to consider. And I myself, I don't know about my colleagues, but I find that there's much more than a preponderance of the evidence that this is good for our community, meets the legal standards, and otherwise should be approved. But I just want to make that a matter of public record, at least for me, that this is something that meets our review and follows the factors that are listed out in our ordinances. So I'm recommending approval on this for that basis.
Thank you. Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Byrd?
Yes.
Mr. Lyons?
Yes.
Mr. Shaw?
Yes.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Starling?
Yes.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
Mr. Otto?
Yes.
Mrs. Blankenship?
Yes.
And passes 8-0. Motion to adopt. Mr. Lyons.
Move to adopt.
And Ms. Blankenship.
Second.
Call the roll, please.
Mr. Lyons?
Yes.
Mr. Shaw?
Yes.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Starling?
Yes.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
Mr. Otto?
Yes.
Mrs. Blankenship?
Yes.
Mrs. Byrd?
Yes.
And passes 8-0. Moving on to 12E. Please read the ordinance.
Item 12E, an ordinance to approve a major change to the previously approved basic and detailed development plans to amend zoning case 11-01 to add a pedestrian entrance from Charles Gate Road to the Huber Heights Recreation and Activity Center at the northwest corner of Brant Pike and Shaw Road, zoning case 16-23 at the first reading.
Thank you very much. Call on Assistant City Manager Scott Flakowski for comments.
We had the public hearing earlier tonight. This also was recommended by Planning Commission unanimously for passage, and we recommend that this goes to the second reading.
Thank you very much. And call on Councilmember Glenn Olive for comments.
As Scott's already stated, the recommendation has been to take it on to a second reading. Obviously, we have plenty to continue talking about with it. So that's the recommendation.
Council? And it'll pass on to the second reading. And would we like to see this as an agenda item within the work session as well? Mr. Shaw?
For me personally, I would just like to have any prior minutes of any other meetings that transpired previously to my coming on council, so that I can have a full research and understanding of any promises or guarantees that may or may not have been given.
Okay. And I know the process went on for quite a while. Yes, Mr. Falkowski.
Before the work session meeting, in the packet was meeting minutes from the original Planning Commission meetings and City Council meetings.
So just to clarify, those were all the meeting minutes.
Of Planning Commission and City Council meetings, I don't know.
Perfect.
There was that one town hall that had to do with parks and recreation issues that we could get you.
Do we have meeting minutes for that?
Yeah, we do.
Oh, that'd be great. Excellent.
I think we even have a video of it too. So.
Thank you.
All right. And we will see this as an agenda item with references to any read-aheads for the work session. And pass it on to the second reading as well. And moving on to 12F, please read the resolution.
Item 12F, a resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into amended agreements with Robert B. Coughlin and Ryan L. Brunk for prosecution services and declaring an emergency at first reading.
Thank you very much. Call on Assistant City Manager Scott Flakowski for comments.
The law firm which we use for our prosecution services has dissolved, and the two gentlemen that represent us, they would like to continue to work for us. Mr. Coughlin and Mr. Brunk are the two attorneys that we have been using this year. And it is, we would like to move forward as soon as possible, so there's no interruption in service with new contracts with each of them. There is no additional fee being requested.
Thank you very much. Call on Councilmember Judy Blankenship for comments.
Right, we did discuss this, and like you said, there's no monetary change in the contract whatsoever. It's just a name change, and we'll be dealing with them individually as opposed to the firm. So there, other than that, there isn't any other change, right, Scott? That's how I understand it. Okay, fine. And so we did have an agreement to move forward tonight. Did you need this tonight, right?
We are requesting emergency legislation.
Right, okay. So I'll waive the second and third read, make a motion to waive the second and third reading.
Thank you. And Ms. Burge, seconds. Discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Shaw?
Yes.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Starling?
Yes.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
Mr. Otto?
Yes.
Mrs. Blankenship?
Yes.
Mrs. Burge?
Yes.
Mr. Lyons?
Yes.
Passes 8-0. Motion to adopt. Mr. Lyons?
Move to adopt.
Ms. Blankenship?
Second?
Thank you very much. Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Starling?
Yes.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
Mr. Otto?
Yes.
Mrs. Blankenship?
Yes.
Mrs. Burge?
Yes.
Mr. Lyons?
Yes.
Mr. Shaw?
Yes.
And passes 8-0. Moving on to 12G. Please read the ordinance.
Item 12G, an ordinance directing the boards of elections of Montgomery County and Miami County to place on the ballot at the general election to be held on November 8, 2016, the question of whether the City of Huber Heights should make enhancements to the water utility through installation of a water softening system at the first reading.
Thank you very much. Call on Assistant City Manager Scott Flakowski for comments.
This is being brought back, legislation to place this on the ballot for the fall. The water softening study is going to be presented at the next committee meeting. That it is ready for distribution for that discussion, but this is to start the process again about bringing it forward to a November election.
Thank you very much. Ms. Burge?
Yes, as Mr. Falkowski mentioned, we did discuss this in, sorry. I know. As Mr. Falkowski mentioned, we did discuss this at the work session, and it has been recommended to go to a second reading.
All right, Council, discussion? And we'll wait for the report and see how the numbers, as among other things, show out in the committee of the whole meeting. Moving on to 12H, please read the resolution.
Item 12H, a resolution authorizing the city manager to expend funds to cover the cost of various goods and services ordered by city departments, divisions, and declaring an emergency at the first reading.
Thank you very much. Call on Assistant City Manager Scott Flakowski for comments.
Thank you. This is the amnesty legislation. There are two items on that the purchase order was received after the service date. We are recommending that it can be approved tonight so those bills can be paid.
Thank you very much. Council? Ms. Blankenship?
Move to waive the second and third reading.
Thank you. Is there a second? Mr. Starline. Thank you. Discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Starling?
Yes.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
Mr. Otto?
Yes.
Mrs. Blankenship?
Yes.
Mrs. Byrd?
Yes.
Mr. Lyons?
Yes.
Mr. Shaw?
Yes.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
And passes 8-0. Motion to adopt.
Everybody's
Ms.
sleeping
Blankenship?
tonight? What is going on? Yes.
And Mr. Otto?
Move to adopt.
Thank you very much. Call the roll, please.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
Mr. Otto?
Yes.
Mrs. Blankenship?
Yes.
Mrs. Byrd?
Yes.
Mr. Lyons?
Yes.
Mr. Shaw?
Yes.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Starling?
Yes.
Thank you very much.
That's what I like.
And it passes 8-0. Moving on to 12I. Please read the ordinance.
Item 12I, an ordinance authorizing advances and transfers between various funds of the City of Heber Heights, Ohio, and amending ordinance number 2015-0-2190 by making supplemental appropriations for expenses of the City of Heber Heights, Ohio, for the period beginning January 1st, 2016, and ending December 31st, 2016 at the first reading.
Thank you very much. Call on Assistant City Manager Scott Fikowski for comments.
This is the supplemental appropriations. There were 5 items that were presented at the committee meeting. The majority of that is based on the grant for the fire truck that the Finance Department is recommending that transferring the money into, or advancing the money into the Firefighters Assistance Grant Fund and combining everything there for use for this new fire truck, and then when the grant is received, the money will be transferred back. And then also the transfer of money from general fund to capital improvement fund because of the land sale around the TJ Chumps in that area that goes in the capital improvement fund because that's where the money originally came from. So that's the recommendation of the auditors on that one. And then also the smaller ones, the issuance costs on the note issue, and the $21,000 for the cash surety fund to match the deposits that came in.
Thank you very much. And call on Councilmember Ed Lyons for comments.
Yes, this was in front of the council work session, and we recommend waiving the second and third reading, and that is a motion.
Thank you. Ms. Burge?
Second.
Thank you. Discussion. Call the roll, please.
Mr. Otto?
Yes.
Mrs. Blankenship?
Yes.
Mrs. Byrd?
Yes.
Mr. Lyons?
Yes.
Mr. Shaw?
Yes.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Starling?
Yes.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
And motion to adopt. Mr. Starling?
Move to adopt.
Thank you. Mr. Shaw?
Second.
Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Blankenship?
Yes.
Mrs. Byrd?
Yes.
Mr. Lyons?
Yes.
Mr. Shaw?
Yes.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Starline?
Yes.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
Mr. Otto?
Yes.
And passes 8-0. Moving on to item 12J. Please read the resolution.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor, I'm going to have to recuse myself from discussion on this topic.
Okay, thank you very much.
Item 12J, a resolution designating public depositories for city funds at the first reading.
And call on City Manager, Assistant City Manager Scott Fikowski.
Thank you. This legislation, every 5 years, the city's required to designate banks as eligible depositories of city funds. The existing designations expire in August of 2016, so the city will need to execute new 5-year agreements. All the banks currently designated are as eligible are included in legislation, as well as 2 additional banks, and we recommend this goes to a second reading.
And thank you very much. Call on Councilmember Janelle Smith for comments.
Thank you so much. We did talk about this at the work session, and staff did recommend that it goes to a second reading.
Thank you. And Council? Council's wish. Moving on to a second reading. And also moving on to 12K, please read the resolution.
Item 12K, a resolution amending resolution number 2015-R-6264, authorizing the city manager to increase the annual not-to-exceed amount with vendor A.E. David in the police division at the first reading.
Call on Assistant City Manager Scott Flakowski for comments.
Thank you. For the outfitting of 4 new police officers, the purchase of their uniforms and vests and those kind of things will eventually exceed the previously set spending limit with our vendor A.E. David for the police division. So the request is to increase the not to exceed for the year up to $45,000. This is an increase of $13,500 to be able to handle all the uniform purchases throughout the year. And we recommend this goes to a second reading.
Thank you very much. Call on Councilmember Richard Shaw for comments.
Thank you. This was discussed, and I do want to make note that I want to appreciate our city manager for clarifying this a little bit more in detail, and even at the previous work session, spelling that out a little bit further with the increased amount of $13,500. It is staff's recommendation and mine as well that we move this to a second reading.
Thank you, Council. And we will move on to second reading. Moving on to 12L, please read the resolution.
Item 12L, a resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into an agreement with Capital Electric to extend the fire division's fiber optics network up to the new fire station location and waiving the competitive bidding requirements at the first reading.
Thank you. And call on Assistant City Manager Scott Flakowski for comments.
Thank you. This request is, we have a fiber system that the fire department uses that was installed by Capital Electric, and they have the system knowledge. And in the past, we have reached out to other companies and have had trouble of getting other companies that are able to work on this system and help increase this system, which is specific for our fire department. This is not a general system that can be tapped into by the public. So this fiber optic line, this extension is extended up along Old Troy Pike from about Shaw, where it dead ends right now, into along the road in front of the new fire station. So the cost of not to exceed $59,000, and we are requesting approval on this tonight.
Okay. Thank you very much. Call on Councilmember Tyler Starline for comments.
Yes, as the Assistant City Manager has mentioned, this is extending our fiber to the third fire station that we have. The reason for waiving competitive bidding is because of the specific nature of the technology for them, and the fact that it seems no one else could tap in and use it as readily. And we are asking for the passage tonight, and I believe we also want it as non-emergency, so that it'll take the 30 days. But that the fire department can get ready for all of that process in the meantime. So with that, I will make the motion to waive the second and third reading.
Thank you. Mr. Otto.
Second.
Council. Mr. Shaw.
I do have a quick discussion, and Scott, maybe you can help me out with this. With this particular item in the locution system that was recently passed earlier, can you explain to me again why these were not vetted in with the construction cost, even though that these are direct costs associated with this fire station?
I'll start with the locution. The locution, the request was just to increase the not-to-exceed amount for the maintenance contracts with it. It had nothing to do with actual construction. So that's the reasoning for that. We weren't asking for the work that's done inside the building. That's part of the general contract for in the locution end of things.
But this would be an indirect cost because of construction.
Yes, because there will be a new station open, an operating cost. That's what this would be for the locution. So typically the operating cost would not be included in construction. It typically would be in the budget for the next year, and it will come to council as part of the budget item for next year once the station is open.
Okay.
Now,
that actually did clear up a lot for me. And the locution system does have hardware associated. And when we got into the email discussion, like a telephone system would have hardware involved with it. That hardware has already been put into the fire station.
It hasn't been installed yet, but yes.
But we've already
It's
paid for
accounted
that,
for under
and
the
we're not
budget.
paying for it here. We're not paying for it here. Okay, so what we're paying for is like the telephone bill.
Yes, and the like we have Black Box as our phone company here. There's a or for the phones themselves and the maintenance of the system. There's a contract each year for if we need to call them for maintenance.
Okay, so I was under the impression as well through most of these discussion that we were putting hardware in instead, but it's nice to hear that clarified.
Correct, and that's why I wanted to bring that clarification line. I know we had an email discussion of that kind of going forward, but you know, I had some folks kind of bring that to my attention, and I wanted to make sure that we was all on the same page, giving out the correct information to the public. So thank you.
And then for the fiber optic line, that is something that came up of how the fire department wanted to do it after the initial budgets had came through, and the prices came in higher than they expected for extending that fiber. We actually had a hard time getting numbers on the costs and everything, and so that's why they're requesting that this come through as a separate project.
Excellent, thank you.
Thank you. And I'm sorry, I've missed the recommendation.
We have a first and second on the motion to waive.
Thank you. And call the roll.
Mrs. Byrd?
Yes.
Mr. Lyons?
Yes.
Mr. Shaw?
Yes.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Starling?
Yes.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
Mr. Otto? Yes. Mrs. Blankenship?
Yes.
And passes 8-0. Motion to adopt. Mr. Starling.
Move to adopt.
Mr. Shaw.
Second.
Call the roll, please.
Mr. Lyons?
Yes.
Mr. Shaw?
Yes.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Starling?
Yes.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
Mr. Otto? Yes. Mrs. Blankenship?
Yes.
Mrs. Byrd?
Yes.
And passes 8-0. Moving on to 12M. Please read the resolution.
Item 12M, a resolution authorizing the city manager to waive the competitive bidding requirements to enter into an agreement with Sutphen Fire Apparatus Corporation for the purchase of a new fire engine and declaring an emergency at first reading.
Thank you very much. Call on Assistant City Manager Scott Flakowski for comments.
As you recall, the city has received a grant for the purchase of a new fire truck. This legislation is for that actual purchase. This is with the Sutphen Fire Apparatus Corporation. They cost the not to exceed $489,860. That is for us to move forward with that. As was mentioned in the committee meeting, as this process is going through, we should receive the monies from the grant before we have to expend, but we do have to have it budgeted and have to have the money in place in a purchase order to be able to move forward. And then the grant funding coming in is $431,819. So the city portion of about $58,000. Part of that is that additional piece for basically the large spotlights that is utilized by the fire department, and also a large benefit to the police department as well.
Okay, thank you very much. And call on Councilmember Mark Campbell for comments.
Yes, again, Mayor, this was presented to the committee, and the committee did recommend waiving both readings, so I would move to waive the second, third readings.
Thank you. Ms. Burge. Seconds. Discussion. Call the roll, please.
Mr. Shaw?
Yes.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Starling?
Yes.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
Mr. Otto? Yes. Mrs. Blankenship?
Yes.
Mrs. Byrd?
Yes.
Mr. Lyons?
Yes.
And passes 8-0. Motion to adopt. Mr. Lyons.
Move to adopt.
Ms. Blankenship.
Second.
Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Starline?
Yes.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
Mr. Otto? Yes. Mrs. Blankenship?
Yes.
Mrs. Byrd?
Yes.
Mr. Lyons?
Yes.
Mr. Shaw?
Yes.
And passes 8-0. Moving on to 12N. Please read the resolution.
Item 12N, a resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into an agreement for electric generation supply with a competitive retail electric service provider, appointing procuring agents for bids and declaring an emergency at the first reading.
Thank you. Call on Assistant City Manager Scott Fikowski for comment.
The existing electric generation supply agreement with DPL Energy Resources expires December 31st of this year. We are part of one of 24 municipalities that are in the Miami Valley Communications Council electric generation supply agreement. By being part of this, we've had the opportunity to get a little more savings than if we went out on our own. This does apply to all of the city-owned properties. And we would like to move forward to renew and go forward with a new agreement with the Miami Valley Communications Council.
Thank you very much. Call on Councilmember Glenn Otto for comments.
We did have this discussion during work session, and this is to anyone who may be curious out there in internet world. This has nothing to do with the aggregation that we had spoke about concerning residents. This is simply the city's agreement with other municipalities to enter a generation supply agreement. And yes, it was recommended that we go ahead and pass this. So I'd like to make that motion.
Motion to waive the second, third readings made. Second. Mr. Lyons.
Second.
All right. Discussion. Call the roll, please.
Mr. Starline?
Yes.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
Mr. Otto?
Yes.
Mrs. Blankenship?
Yes.
Mrs. Byrd?
Yes.
Mr. Lyons?
Yes.
Mr. Shaw?
Yes.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
And passes 8-0. Motion to adopt. Mr. Starling.
Move to adopt.
Thank you. Ms. Smith.
Second.
Call the roll, please.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
Mr. Otto?
Yes.
Mrs. Blankenship?
Yes.
Mrs. Byrd?
Yes.
Mr. Lyons?
Yes.
Mr. Shaw?
Yes.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Starline?
Yes.
And thank you very much. Moving on to agenda item 13. Did we pick up any action items?
I didn't have any, to get Mr. Shaw the information he was looking for on the aquatic center thing, the minutes from that additional meeting, I had noted, and then I had 2 work session items noted for follow-up, which were the chickens in the residential areas and the aquatic center entrance off of Charles Street.
Okay. And Ms. Smith.
Yes, I'd like to bring everybody's attention to the Roberts Rule of Order under unfinished business. The last few months we have not been able to get through all of the agenda items, and it seems like they drop off and we don't ever get to them. I know that there have been some residents here the last 3 months that have been waiting for one particular topic, which is council communications that's been on the agenda that we have not been able to get to. And under the Roberts Rule of Order, it basically says that following reports or groups moved on a consider item of business, if it's carried over from a previous meeting, that those matters should be automatically brought to the top of the agenda. And so I would just like to remind us of that so that we can get to all the agenda items that we're putting on the agenda, and we're giving everybody a fair chance to come early and listen to those items, because you know, our meetings are lasting until sometimes wee hours of the morning, and people just don't have it in them to go to work all day and then come here and wait for the item that they're waiting to hear on. And it's very discouraging for residents to come month after month and we're still not getting to that item. So I just wanted to bring that to our attention.
Thank you. And further action items?
2025 plan, can we have an update on that and discuss that?
Mr. Schomer had indicated last time that staff were in the process of working on a presentation specifically to that. I think that was the update that was given at the last work session, and the plan is either for next week or at a meeting very soon to have that presentation made.
And
so that's in progress.
I know that the water softening there's going to be a presentation at the next work session. Unfortunately, I'm trying to support the Music Center as well, so I already purchased tickets to an event that evening. will we have that report before Tuesday evening? Is it possible that we can review it so maybe I can send questions to one of the other members that could answer or ask those questions?
We will have it by the time the packet goes out, so it will be in the packet in the read-aheads. Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right. Future agenda items. Mr. Shaw.
I do have a future agenda item I would like to bring up, and that is commercial truck parking within our developments and our businesses and residential areas. It has come to my attention through 2015 and recently here in 2016, we have many business owners who have an abundant amount of commercial truck parking in their establishments, and it is causing a bit of a rough. Just recently, I know it made the news at Myers up north. So it is definitely something I believe our city needs to take a grasp hold on and relook at. I know the city used to have a commercial truck stop in the city, but currently there is nowhere legally within the city of Huber Heights that a commercial truck can park securely and safely. And a lot of our residents in the city drive commercial truck, and we, even in the city, have commercial trucking such as FedEx, ABF, and the list goes on and on. So I think that's something that we need to address and maybe get our hands wrapped around. And I know that the city does have some property that is available that I believe that we should be able to accommodate commercial truck parking and work with the chamber and see how we can come up and facilitate that.
Thank you very much. And could you write out this as well as identify that property that you're proposing and any proposal and give it to the council?
Sure.
Thank you. Ms. Smith.
And if I could just piggyback on what Mr. Shaw said, that's a very good, valid point, because right now, if you notice, the semis are actually parking on the ramps from 70 because there's nowhere safely for them to park, so they're just kind of lining up, on the ramps, and that's really not safe. And so I appreciate him bringing that up and I've had a couple of residents say that, their husbands are professional truck drivers, and when they come home, there's really nowhere for them to park. And really, Huber is one of the last stops before they go further east or, west isn't so much of a problem. But logistically, I think this is a good move, and I agree with that. Thank you.
And if there's a distinguishing thing, whether you want an area for residents to be able to park while they're on rest, or if you're actually looking for trucks that pass through to have an area, if you could highlight that in your discussion as well.
I will bring up several discussion points as well as pictures that's been taken out through the city. I'll address council in the days ahead to drive by one hot spot, which is Royal King at the intersection right up the road here of Troy and Taylorsville. At one point in time, there was pictured of over 11 trucks parked in that parking lot. And there's even been instances that I've been made aware of where trucks have maybe come out of gear and have rolled down and caused damage to homes and businesses. So this is definitely something that we need to take a grasp on. And I will be presenting read-aheads and things of that items for discussion as well.
Great. Thank you. Mr. Otto.
I would like to piggyback. That's a topic that I have discussed with others in the past as well. I'm glad Mr. Shaw brought it up now. I kind of was waiting for other things to drop off before throwing some things on. But the community in which we live, we have a lot of business owners that are, they work in construction, drywall, roofing, painting, whatever it may be, and a lot of truck drivers as well. And we really don't have a way to accommodate their vehicles. And I do believe we need to look into a solution for this. I'm not so much concerned with the pass-through traffic, but to take care of our citizens who, are working those jobs and running those small businesses. I think we need to give them that an opportunity to have a safe, easy place to park for their vehicles.
And Ms. Blankenship.
Okay, we can discuss this at the time it comes up, but the reason we don't have one anymore is because I did live here when we did have one, and it was nothing but trouble. It was a lot of crime, rape, prostitution, and so when we move forward, you're going to have that to deal with, and you'll have to have these issues addressed, because there's no way I am going to prove anything after I know what we went through with this place, and I know times change and we can change, and I'm all for that because I know we do have a group, but it's going to have to be really good.
Yeah. And I actually appreciate that there's so much interest, and we don't have to limit the points for discussion to just Mr. Shaw. We could or everybody that's interested can forward that to Clerk of Council, Mr. Rogers. All right, thank you. Any other items for potential discussion? Ms. Blankenship.
I hesitate bringing this up, but I am going to, and it's regarding our legal counsel, and it's not you personally, Alan, so I want to take that off the table right away because I've already chatted with him about this. When we had the 3 separate committees, we did not need Alan at our first one or our second one. We only needed him in the administrative committee, and at times when we needed him, we would have a question. The fire chief or police chief would contact him and get the question answered and get back to us. So our expenses for legal, our legal expenses are doubling because he's here for this for 5 or 6 hours, and he's at our work sessions for 5 or 6 hours. So we're actually doubling up on our legal expenses almost. I haven't got a figure, but I can get them for you because I've been watching it. So when you get the legal expenses, watch it. And Alan, again, I apologize. This is not to you personally. You know that. But I would like to look at that because does he need to be at our work sessions all 6 hours? Because we pay him hourly. And so when you double that twice a month, we're talking quite a few $1,000s. And so I just want to bring that to our attention so we can see if there's a way forward that we can work on this.
Okay, thank you very much. And I certainly believe that that's a good discussion to have as well. Thank you. Mr. Starling.
I'll piggyback off the wrong one. There we are. I'll piggyback off of that. I'd like to see an item revived. There was a proposal by the city manager, Rob Schomer, and I previously regarding some revisions to the rules of council as it relates to the procedure for work session. I think that I'd like to present that, and it's specifically a proposal for what I've at least tentatively termed consent legislation agenda, where if there are items presented that have been presented out to everyone, they're in the packet, but if no one needs to discuss it, we've pretty much seen that it's been properly briefed, as it were, then it can be something that at the very beginning of work session can be identified and then move on, and that may start to limit the number of long debates on items that we need that for and expedite, there it is, that process. So Rob and I had worked on it. I'll make sure that it's back for read-ahead and work session for the next meeting, and maybe we can actually make the work sessions more efficient and yet also be still informed on the items that we need to talk about.
Okay, thank you. All right. We will move on to city official reports and comments. I forget how I was last did it, so let's start with Ms. Blankenship.
I've been talking a lot tonight, so I'll just continue. I'm on a roll, guys. I want to thank the Junior ROTC Honor Guard for being here tonight and for their what they're preparing to move forward to help with the drug abuse. I think that's really worthy of them, and I hope we can help in some way. And our amateur radio club, glad you're here, and I've enjoyed being over there, and we've done this in the past, and it's very nice and informative, so thank you for inviting us again, and I hope you have a good success with that. Thanks for all you do. And I think that's it.
Thank you very much. Ms. Burge.
since we were talking about Alan's expenses, I have to ask the question, Tony, since we're in the legislative section of the charter review, are we going to have Alan come visit us?
Alan is coming tomorrow, or Wednesday, to the charter review, to that one.
Good.
Just because it is such a critical juncture in terms of the topic thing that, as we had discussed at the charter review, I asked Alan to be present so that I think even with the cost of him being there, one, we know our meetings there have been time focused, so we're not talking more than 2 hours. And the other thing is, I think that the back and forth that we're on this particular topic that might need to take place would probably necessitate some additional expenses anyway and delay the decision-making part of that process. So I think it's particularly appropriate at this juncture because that's something that's been so hotly debated, amongst the public and council as far as, the waiving of the readings, the emergency legislation and such.
Right, and it's better now to do it face to face. Yeah.
I think it'll actually shorten the process in terms of Alan's services by him being there to entertain the questions directly for this. It's not something we're planning to do for every meeting. It's just this particular topic.
That's great. Thank you. And the other thing I have, that they still need volunteers for the Star Spangled Celebration. If anybody's interested, contact Margie Mall here at the city. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Starling.
All right. I also want to thank the young Marines that came and presented tonight. That was informative, and I hope to see something out of that. The fact that we have so many drug overdose deaths, that we have so many that are receiving treatment. Hopefully this is something that we can start to improve on. I know that there are other entities that are working on that as well. The amateur radio, that was a good short presentation, and the materials they provided. Jack Brankamp has already left, but he has been a great advocate for the city and a good representative for us in terms of with the VFW. He ran for one of their bigger offices. The vote was this past weekend. He did not win, but it was a three-way race, but he indicated that he is intending to put his hat in the ring again next year. So overall, Jack has been just a great advocate for the veterans and a great advocate for the city, and I wanted to mention that. Community movie night, assuming Mother Nature finally starts playing nice, since we've had 2 rainouts already. This week, the 18th, starting around 9:20, so about dark, will be the next one. It is Hotel Transylvania 2. For those that have not gone before but may have little kids or even kids at heart that want to go, it's at the amphitheater over by the Aquatic Center of the Y. You can bring blankets, bring chairs, and it's just a fun night for the kids and the community. They have food trucks there for ice cream and other stuff. So just wanting folks to know that that is this week. Let me see. Thoughts and prayers go out to the Voinovich family. George passed away yesterday, a governor, a senator for this state, who at least for many did a wonderful job representing Ohio, and just thoughts and prayers go out to his family. And with that, also the senseless violence of yesterday down in Orlando. Thoughts and prayers go out to the friends, the family, those that were injured, those that were senselessly taken from us. Hopefully that sort of misconduct, and that's the nicest way I can think of phrasing it, can stop. And so, again, just thoughts and prayers on that. So I think that's all I have then. Thank you all. Thank you. Sorry to be a downer.
Ms. Smith.
I don't really have much to say this evening. I've already said everything I need to say. I just want to thank everybody for coming out this evening. There's only one thing note that I'd like to let everybody know, and that is the Ward 2 next meeting will be July 29th. That is a Friday. It will start at 6 p.m. until 8 p.m. And I have decided that I'm going to turn this ward meeting into a community picnic. I will be providing hot dogs, potato salad, chips, lemonade, water, and probably a fruit. I know that we'll have bubbles and sidewalk chalk for the children. And if anybody would like to help volunteer putting this together, I'm looking for any individuals that would like to help organize maybe some games that we can do for the kids or even some for the adults. We will discuss some city business, but you know it's mainly a cookout at Shellgate Park. It'll be smack square in the middle of Ward 2. And I would like everybody to, when they get off of work, come on over, get your kids, get your family, bring lawn chairs, blankets, whatever you need. There's 2 large grills there, so again, I am providing the hot dogs, but if you want hamburgers or chicken or ribs or what have you, steak, you got to bring your own. So, and that's all I have, and I want to make sure that everybody's aware, and all of my colleagues, you're more than welcome to attend. That would be wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Otto.
I would also like to commend the Miami Valley Young Marines on their project or Operation Spartan Spear. It's a very noble cause, and I wish them all the best of luck. That'll be on August 6th at Gary Sherman Park. And Mr. Leeds with the Heber Heights Amateur Radio Club. Good luck with your event as well. Again, to anyone who missed it, that's June 25th, overnight to the 26th, correct? Okay. And I hope you have a great turnout. I'm going to do everything I can to get by. I'll leave it short. Thank you.
Very much. Mr. Lyons.
Yes, my prayers go out for the families in the terrible Orlando tragedy recently, and I hope everything works its way forward to rest those souls that have been tragically lost. Also, I do want to commend Mrs. Smith. Your comment concerning Robert's Rules of Orders tonight was very timely, because I was going to make the same recommendation to the mayor to move the items up from the bottom of the last public or work session up, and I think even somebody mentioned that at that particular meeting at the very end. If for some reason, Mayor, there's a disagreement with the Roberts Rules with that, please put me down as wanting to move those items up on the agenda, especially the policy review that we have concerning the missing document. I think that's a very serious issue, and I believe our attorney will have a presentation at that point in time, and he'll be finished. Is that right, Mr. Schaefer?
That's correct.
So I would even say I would like to see that one at the very top at the work session, but that's my suggestion. Thank you.
Mr. Campbell. Mr. Shaw.
Thank you. Tonight I would like to also acknowledge the Young Marines and their drug awareness program, Spartan Spear. Earlier this year, I got to actually speak directly with the Attorney General when it comes to the heroin epidemic that's going on in our area. I also got to speak to the Young Marines during our Clean Up the Park Day to kind of get this moved along, and I think they're having a great initiative to move this along and bring a lot of education to this area of the region that in my opinion, doesn't really have the education that it needs. So I think that's hugely beneficial, and I commend their efforts. I'd also like to note that we do have open boards and commission seats available to get your applications in to our clerk of council. That information can be found on our website, or you can contact any one of your council representatives or the clerk of council for more information on that. I'd also like to get an update on where we're at with our seasonal park help. I know we were out there looking for some individuals. I just want to make sure that Mike Gray's got the staff he needs for the season. I know baseball and soccer is almost in full swing, and we definitely need to make sure that we got everything going on to take care of our park. And kind of segue into my second to last comment is the second annual Thomas Cloud Cleanup Day, scheduled for July 29th between 9:30 and 1:30 p.m. This will be a collaborative effort with Montgomery County and the Community Pride Trailer again this year. Last year's efforts had over 71 volunteers with almost a half a ton of debris, and a lot of efforts went into painting, refurbishing that park. And as being one of the ultimate gems of our city, it was the community's decision to move forward with the second annual event. Last year's event was a huge success, and not one city tax dollar was spent in those efforts. With the support of local businesses and residents out there, was a huge success. So that will be going on this year. Information, there is a Facebook event and web page that is set up to support that effort, and I think it's going to be a huge success. In closing tonight, along with my colleagues, the events in Orlando, Florida did kind of hit home with me quite a bit. I have a lot of friends that know individuals in Florida and the Orlando area. And when I heard about this tragedy, not only the fact that it was 50 Americans, 50, brothers and sisters, and 50 individuals that, we call friends and family that was tragically gunned down in one of the largest mass shootings of our country, but the fact that it was going after a group of individuals that does not need any further hate or discrimination thrown their way, that have stood up for their own and have shown nothing but love and pride for this country, and have gotten shot down in every effort coming and going. I don't condone those efforts. I stand for the love and support of Florida and the entire country, and definitely I've heard some great supports of vigils even going on at UD and a lot of the areas surrounding, and I definitely will take part in those events. And I know just recently Dayton had their Pride Festival as well, and my daytime business was a huge sponsor of that, not only with the parade but the festival as well. So my thoughts and prayers go out to those in Orlando and across the country that's dealing with this tragedy, and this type of situation and this hate and discrimination definitely needs to stop throughout our country. And I think that we need to stand behind and give whatever support we can. That's all the comments I have this evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much. There's no need for an executive session this evening, so therefore the meeting is adjourned.